Victoria Hale had built empires with cold precision and ruthless calculation, but standing in her penthouse at 2 a.m., staring at a stranger's desperate online post, she made the most reckless decision of her life. She needed a fake boyfriend for one weekend. He needed money to save his dying daughter. What should have been a simple transaction, a performance, nothing more, shattered the moment their hands touched. Because some lies are too dangerous to maintain, and some truths too powerful to deny. When pretending becomes real and a child's life hangs in the balance, love stops being a choice and becomes a battleground. Before we begin this journey of second chances and impossible choices, please hit that like button and comment with your city below. I want to see how far this story travels and who's listening from around the world. The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and Evan Brooks almost deleted it. Seeking companion for family event, one weekend. Compensation, $50,000. He'd been scrolling through freelance postings for 3 hours, his eyes burning, his coffee long cold, searching for anything that might cover even a fraction of what he owed. Graphic design gigs that paid $200. Content writing for $50 an article. Odd jobs that wouldn't even touch the interest on Mia's medical bills, let alone the principal that grew like a malignant thing in his inbox every morning. $50,000. Evan's finger hovered over the delete button. It had to be a scam. Had to be. Nobody offered that kind of money for a weekend unless something illegal was involved, and he'd promised Sarah, promised his late wife on her deathbed, that he'd take care of their daughter the right way. No shortcuts. No compromises. But $50,000 would cover the next surgery. Maybe two. He clicked the email open. The message was brief, almost clinical. Discretion required. Professional demeanor essential. Interview tomorrow, 6 p.m. Address below. Come alone. There was a phone number for confirmation, nothing else. No explanation of what the event entailed, no details about who was hiring or why. Evan looked across his cramped apartment to where Mia slept in her hospital bed, the one that took up half their living room because she couldn't climb stairs anymore. 7 years old, and she'd spent more time in hospitals than playgrounds. The monitors beeped softly, tracking vitals that had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. He picked up his phone and dialed before he could talk himself out of it. A woman answered on the first ring. Her voice was crisp, professional, completely devoid of warmth. Mr. Brooks? How did you... You're the only one I sent the posting to. Can you make tomorrow at 6? Evan's throat went dry. She'd targeted him specifically. Somehow she'd found him, vetted him, decided he was worth approaching. I need to know what this is about. Tomorrow at 6. The address is in the email. Don't be late. She hung up. Evan sat in the darkness, listening to his daughter breathe, and wondered what kind of desperation made a man walk into the unknown for money. The same kind that made him show up the next evening at an address in the kind of neighborhood where his 10-year-old sedan looked like it should be towed for lowering property values. The building was all glass and steel, rising into the twilight like a monument to wealth he couldn't comprehend. Evan had dressed in his only suit, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral 3 years ago and hadn't touched since. It still smelled faintly of mothballs despite his best efforts. Security stopped him at the lobby. Name? Evan Brooks. I have an appointment. The guard checked his tablet, eyebrows rising slightly. Top floor. Ms. Hale is expecting you. The elevator was the size of Evan's bedroom. It rose so smoothly he barely felt the movement, just watched the numbers climb. 10, 20, 30, 40. When the doors opened, he stepped into a penthouse that made his entire life feel impossibly small. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive fabrics. Art he couldn't name hung on walls painted in shades of gray and white. Everything was perfect, sterile, untouched, like a photograph of wealth rather than a place where anyone actually lived. Mr. Brooks. He turned. The woman standing in the doorway wore a black suit that probably cost more than his car. She was younger than he'd expected, mid-30s maybe, with dark hair pulled back severely and eyes that assessed him with the same clinical precision as her email. Beautiful in a way that felt dangerous, like something you weren't supposed to touch. Ms. Hale? Victoria. She didn't offer her hand, didn't smile. Thank you for coming. Please, sit. Evan lowered himself onto a chair that was somehow both beautiful and deeply uncomfortable. Victoria remained standing, studying him with an intensity that made him want to fidget. I'm going to be direct because I don't have time to waste, she said. I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend for one weekend. My parents are celebrating their 40th anniversary, and they've made it clear that unless I bring someone, I'm not welcome. I have no interest in an actual relationship, but I need to maintain appearances. Why me? Because you need money desperately enough to show up to a suspicious email, but you have a 7-year-old daughter, which suggests you're not completely reckless. You're attractive enough to be believable, ordinary enough not to draw unnecessary attention, and your background check came back clean. Evan's hands clenched. You ran a background check? Of course I did. Did you think I'd invite a stranger into my life without research? Victoria moved to the window, her back to him. Your wife died of cancer 3 years ago. Your daughter has a congenital heart condition requiring multiple surgeries. You've burned through your savings, maxed out your credit cards, and you're approximately 4 months from bankruptcy. You work as a freelance graphic designer, making roughly 1/5 of what you need to cover your daughter's medical expenses. You're drowning, Mr. Brooks, and I'm offering you a life preserver. The words hit him like physical blows. Hearing his failure laid out so clinically, so completely, made something hot and sharp twist in his chest. You don't know anything about my life. I know enough. Victoria turned, her expression unchanged. $50,000 for one weekend. Friday evening through Sunday afternoon. We'll fly to my parents' estate upstate, attend the anniversary party, maintain the appearance of a romantic relationship, and leave. Simple. Nothing about this is simple. No, Victoria agreed, but it's straightforward. I need a believable boyfriend. You need money. This is a business transaction, nothing more. Evan stood. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to find another solution, to not get tangled up in whatever calculated game this woman was playing. But he thought of Mia's next surgery, scheduled in 6 weeks, and the bill he couldn't pay, and the very real possibility that his daughter would end up on a waiting list that might kill her. I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not, he said quietly. I don't care how much you're paying. I won't be talked down to or treated like hired furniture. I'll be respectful to your family. I'll play whatever role you need, but I'm not your possession. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Surprise, maybe. Or something closer to respect. Agreed. And I need half up front, $25,000, transferred before we leave. Done. It was too easy, too quick. Evan studied her, trying to understand what he was missing, what game she was actually playing. Why are you really doing this? Victoria's expression went carefully blank. That's not your concern. It is if I'm walking into something that could hurt my daughter. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Outside, the city lights began to glow against the darkening sky. When Victoria finally spoke, her voice was softer, edged with something that might have been pain. My parents built their fortune on family values and traditional marriage. They see my success as a personal failure because I'm not married with children. They've threatened to restructure the company if I don't prove I'm capable of maintaining a balanced life. But it's antiquated, it's insulting, and it's also legally enforceable based on how the business was structured. So I need to give them what they want to see, even if it's a lie. You could find someone real. I don't have time for real. Victoria moved to her desk, pulling out a contract. Real is messy. Real has expectations and emotions and complications I can't afford. This is clean. You need money. I need appearances. We both get what we want. Evan took the contract, scanning the terms. It was exactly as she'd described. One weekend, $50,000, confidentiality clauses that would bankrupt him if he violated them. At the bottom, a space for his signature. My daughter, he said slowly. She can't be left alone. I have a neighbor who watches her when I work, but I'd need to arrange something longer. Bring her. Evan's head snapped up. What? Bring your daughter. My parents' estate has medical facilities. My mother has a chronic condition. We can arrange for proper care. And honestly, it makes our relationship more believable. A man who brings his sick child to meet his girlfriend's parents is clearly serious. I'm not using Mia as a prop. I'm not suggesting you do. Victoria's tone sharpened. I'm suggesting you ensure she receives excellent care in a controlled environment while fulfilling our arrangement. Would you prefer to leave her with a neighbor for 3 days? Evan hated that she was right. Hated the whole situation, the calculation of it, the way his love for his daughter was being woven into a lie. But he thought of Mia asking him last week if they were going to lose their apartment, her small voice trying to be brave, trying not to be a burden. He signed the contract. Victoria took it, examining his signature before nodding. We leave Friday at 4 p.m. I'll send a car for you. Pack for a weekend at a country estate. Semi-formal attire. And Mr. Brooks? Evan. Evan. She said his name like she was testing it, deciding if it fit. Don't make me regret this. Right back at you, he said, and left before he could change his mind. The money hit his account the next morning. $25,000, real and immediate. Evan stared at the number until his eyes burned, then called the hospital to schedule Mia's surgery. Daddy? Mia's voice was soft from her bed. Why are you crying? He hadn't realized he was. Evan crossed to her, kneeling beside the hospital bed that dominated their home. His daughter looked up at him with Sarah's eyes, too wise for 7 years old, too familiar with pain. Happy tears, sweetheart, the good kind. Did something good happen? Yeah. He brushed her hair back from her forehead. Something good happened, and we're going to go on a little trip this weekend. Mia's face lit up. She so rarely got to leave the apartment, her world limited by monitors and medication schedules and the constant fear of infection. Really? Where? To the country. There's going to be a big house and gardens, and they have nurses there who can help take care of you. Will there be other kids? Evan's chest tightened. I don't know, baby. Maybe. Okay. Mia reached for his hand, her fingers small and fragile in his. Daddy, are you scared? A little, he admitted. Me too. But we're brave together, right? Right. We're brave together. Friday came too fast and not fast enough. Evan packed their bags, Mia's medications carefully organized, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked safely inside, his own belongings taking up barely any space. The car Victoria sent was absurd, a sleek black sedan with a driver who didn't speak, just loaded their bags with mechanical efficiency. Mia pressed her face to the window as they drove through neighborhoods that got progressively wealthier. Daddy, look at that house. It's like a castle. Pretty fancy, huh? Do rich people live different than us? Evan thought of Victoria's sterile penthouse, the way she'd reduced his entire life to a background check and a contract. Yeah, sweetheart, I think they do. The sedan pulled up to Victoria's building. The driver opened the door and Evan helped Mia out, her portable oxygen tank slung over his shoulder. She moved slowly, carefully, every step measured. Victoria was waiting in the lobby. She'd traded her severe suit for tailored pants and a cashmere sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked softer somehow, though her expression remained carefully neutral. Then she saw Mia, and something cracked in that perfect facade. Hello, Victoria said, and her voice wasn't cold anymore. It was careful, gentle, like she was afraid of breaking something. You must be Mia. Mia looked up at this impossibly elegant woman, then at her father, checking if it was okay. Evan nodded. Hi, Mia said shyly. Are you my daddy's friend? Victoria's eyes met Evan's over his daughter's head, and for just a moment the lie felt impossibly heavy. Yes, Victoria said softly. I am. Cool. I like your shoes. The laugh that escaped Victoria sounded surprised, almost rusty, like she wasn't used to using it. Thank you. I like your rabbit. Does he have a name? Mr. Flops. He's been everywhere with me. Mia held up the worn stuffed animal proudly. Even to the hospital. Victoria crouched down, bringing herself to Mia's eye level. Evan watched, transfixed, as the Ice Queen billionaire met his daughter's gaze with something achingly close to tenderness. He looks very brave. He is. Daddy says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do hard things even when you're scared. Your daddy sounds very wise. He is. Mia's conviction was absolute, unshakable. He's the best daddy in the whole world. Evan's throat closed. He saw Victoria's composure waver, something raw and painful crossing her face before she locked it down again. She stood, straightening her shoulders. "We should go," Victoria said, her voice level once more. "The flight is waiting." Of course it was. Because Victoria Hale didn't fly commercial like ordinary people. She owned a private plane. Mia's exhaustion from the car ride evaporated the moment she saw the jet. "Daddy, is that ours?" "For the weekend, yeah. This is the coolest thing that's ever happened." The interior was exactly what Evan expected. Leather seats, polished wood, enough space to feel obscene. A flight attendant appeared immediately, professional and polite, helping Mia settle into a seat that could recline fully flat. "She'll need her medication in 2 hours," Evan said to Victoria, pulling out his carefully organized schedule. "And she gets tired easily, so I've already spoken with the medical staff at my parents' estate." Victoria's tablet appeared in her hands. They have her complete medical history and a protocol approved by her primary physician. She'll have a nurse assigned exclusively to her care. Evan stared. "How did you—" "I'm thorough." Victoria's expression was unreadable. "And I don't do things halfway." The flight was smooth, quiet. Mia fell asleep within 20 minutes, her hand still clutching Mr. Flop's. Evan watched her breathe, counting the rhythm like he always did, making sure each inhale came steady and sure. "You're a good father." He turned. Victoria sat across from him, her tablet set aside, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite name. "I try." "That's more than most people do." She looked at Mia, something wistful crossing her face. "She's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have her." Evan leaned back, suddenly exhausted. "Her mother and we tried for years to have a baby. Sarah had 3 miscarriages before Mia. When she was born, we thought we'd been given a miracle. But she was sick. From the start. The heart condition is genetic. We didn't know Sarah was a carrier. By the time we found out, she was already pregnant with Mia." His voice cracked. "Sarah spent her whole pregnancy knowing our daughter would be sick, knowing she'd passed it on, and it destroyed her. When the cancer came, I think part of her gave up because she couldn't forgive herself." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "And you? Do you blame her?" "No." The answer came instantly. "Certainly. I could never blame her. We made Mia together, and even with everything, the hospitals, the fear, the pain, I wouldn't trade her for anything. She's the best part of me." "You really believe that? Don't you have anything you'd give everything for?" Victoria's laugh was hollow. "I gave everything for my company. Built it from nothing, sacrificed every personal relationship, every moment of softness, every piece of myself that wasn't useful. And now my parents want to take it away because I don't have a husband and children to prove I'm complete. That's not fair." "No," Victoria agreed, "but it's reality. So here we are. You pretending to love me pretending to be someone worth loving. Everyone gets what they need." Evan studied her, this brilliant, brittle woman who'd reduced her life to transactions and contracts. "What happens after this weekend?" "You take your money, Mia gets her surgery, we never see each other again. And you go back to your empty penthouse." Victoria's eyes flashed. "My life works for me." "Does it?" "You don't know me well enough to ask that question." "You're right," Evan said. "I don't, but I know loneliness when I see it." They didn't speak for the rest of the flight. The estate was exactly what Evan had pictured when he thought of old money. Sprawling grounds, a main house that belonged in a period drama, separate guest cottages scattered across perfectly manicured lawns. Staff appeared immediately to take their bags, to help Mia, to usher them inside with practiced deference. Victoria's mother met them in the foyer. Catherine Hale was elegant in the way that came from generations of wealth. Understated jewelry, perfectly tailored clothes, the kind of posture that came from years of finishing school. She looked at her daughter with cool assessment before her eyes landed on Evan and warmed fractionally. "Mother," Victoria's voice was measured, "this is Evan Brooks and his daughter, Mia." "Mrs. Hale," Evan extended his hand. Thank you for having us. Of course. Catherine's handshake was brief but firm. She crouched slightly, addressing Mia directly. And you must be tired from your journey. We have a lovely room prepared for you with a nurse who will make sure you're comfortable. Mia looked to Evan for permission. He nodded, and she managed a small smile. Thank you, ma'am. Such manners. Catherine straightened, studying Evan with new interest. Victoria didn't mention you had a child. I have primary custody, Evan said evenly. She's my priority. As she should be, Catherine turned to her daughter. Your father is in his study. Why don't you introduce Evan while we get this sweet girl settled? It wasn't really a question. Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. The study was all dark wood and leather, the kind of room designed to intimidate. Richard Hale sat behind a desk large enough to feel like a barrier, his steel-gray hair and sharp eyes giving him the appearance of a judge rendering verdict. Father, this is Evan Brooks. Evan, my father, Richard Hale. Richard didn't stand. Brooks. Victoria tells me you're a graphic designer. Freelance. Yes, sir. And you have a sick daughter. Evan's spine stiffened. Beside him, he felt Victoria tense. I have a daughter with a manageable medical condition. Yes. Manageable. Richard's tone suggested he found the word insufficient. Must be expensive. We manage. I'm sure you do. Richard finally stood, moving around the desk with deliberate slowness. My daughter is worth approximately $3.2 billion. Her company employs over 10,000 people and holds patents on technology that will define the next decade. She works 80-hour weeks and has turned down more lucrative offers than you'll make in a lifetime. Tell me, Mr. Brooks, what exactly do you bring to this relationship? The room went deadly silent. Evan felt the weight of the question, the assumption behind it that he was here for money, for access, for anything but what a real relationship should be. The irony that Richard was actually right, that this was a transaction, made the insult burn hotter. But Victoria moved before he could respond. That's enough. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. Evan is here as my guest and my partner. You will treat him with respect, or we'll leave. Your choice. Richard's eyebrows rose. Victoria, I mean it. She moved closer to Evan, a united front. I've spent my entire adult life proving myself to you, meeting every impossible standard you set. I built my company from nothing while you told me I was wasting my time. I've earned my success 1,000 times over, and I don't need your approval of my personal choices. I'm merely being practical. No, you're being controlling, and I'm done with it. Victoria's hand found Evan's, her fingers cool and firm. Evan is a devoted father, a talented professional, and someone who sees me as more than a balance sheet. That's all you need to know. The words were part of their performance, Evan knew, a script they were supposed to sell. But the fury in Victoria's voice felt real, personal, like she was fighting battles that had nothing to do with him. Richard studied them both, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. You've changed. I grew up, Victoria said quietly. Whether you like who I became is your problem, not mine. They left the study in silence, Victoria's hand still gripping Evan's until they were safely in their assigned cottage, a 2-bedroom suite that was larger than his apartment. I'm sorry, Victoria said, releasing him like his touch burned. My father is protective of you in the worst possible way? Something like that. She moved to the window, her shoulders rigid. He built an empire, and he can't understand why I don't want the life he chose. Why I won't marry someone appropriate and produce heirs and run the company the way he would have run it. What do you want? Victoria laughed, the sound bitter. To be left alone to do my work. To not justify my choices every time I see my family. To prove that I'm capable of living my life on my own terms. By hiring a fake boyfriend. By doing what's necessary to keep what's mine. She turned, her expression fierce. You think I'm cold, calculating, and you're right. But I built my company from nothing while men like my father told me I'd fail. I've earned the right to protect it however I need to. Evan crossed the room until they stood close enough to share breath. I don't think you're cold. I think you're scared. I'm not. You're terrified that if you let anyone see who you really are, they'll use it against you. So you keep everyone at arm's length and call it strength. Victoria's eyes flashed dangerously. You don't know anything about me. I know you looked at my daughter like you were seeing something precious you'd forgotten existed. I know you fought your father for a stranger's dignity. I know the way you hold yourself like armor, like if you relax for even a second, you'll shatter. Stop. Why? Because I'm right? Because this isn't real. Victoria's voice cracked. This is a performance, Evan, a transaction. Don't confuse it for something it's not. I'm not confused. Evan stepped back, creating distance. I know exactly what this is, but maybe you should ask yourself why you're working so hard to keep me at a distance when I'm already bought and paid for. He left her standing in the cottage, her reflection caught in the darkening window, looking more alone than anyone he'd ever seen. Evan found Mia in their room, already tucked into bed, a nurse checking her vitals with practiced efficiency. His daughter's eyes lit up when she saw him. Daddy, this bed is so soft and there's a TV and the nurse, her name is Maria, says I can have ice cream if I want it. That sounds pretty great, sweetheart. It is. Mia's smile faded slightly. Are you okay? You look sad. Evan settled on the edge of her bed, marveling as always at how clearly she saw him. Just a long day. I'm better now that I'm with you. Is Victoria nice? He thought of the woman in the other room, brittle and fierce and so carefully controlled. Yeah, baby. I think under everything else, she's very nice. Good. Mia yawned, her eyelids already drooping. I like her. She has sad eyes like yours did after Mommy died. Maybe she needs people to love her too. Evan's throat tightened. Maybe she does. You should tell her that she's not alone. Mia's words slurred with sleep. Nobody should be alone, Daddy. You're right, sweetheart. Nobody should. He sat with her until she fell asleep, Maria quietly monitoring her vitals, the medical equipment creating a familiar rhythm. When he finally returned to the main room, he found Victoria standing exactly where he'd left her. Is she okay? Victoria asked without turning. She's fine. Happy, even. Probably the most excited she's been in months. Good. Evan moved to stand beside her at the window. Outside, the estate glowed with soft lights, beautiful and carefully maintained. Inside, they stood in silence, two people pretending at something neither fully understood. I had a brother, Victoria said suddenly. Younger. He died when I was 14. Evan waited, barely breathing. Car accident. He was 12. My parents, they never recovered. The foundation, the charity work, the obsession with family and legacy, it all comes from losing him, from trying to build something that matters because their son is gone. Victoria, when I saw your daughter today, I remembered what it felt like to love someone that completely, to know they were fragile and precious and temporary. Her voice broke. I haven't let myself feel that in 20 years. Evan turned to her, this powerful woman undone by a child's innocence. That's why you're really doing this, isn't it? Not just the company. You're trying to give your parents something to hold on to. I'm trying to survive. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Is that so terrible? No, Evan said gently. But pretending you don't need anyone? That is? She looked at him finally, really looked, and something shifted between them. The contract, the money, the careful distance, all of it felt suddenly inadequate against what was actually happening. This was supposed to be simple, Victoria whispered. I know. It's not anymore, is it? No, Evan agreed. It's not. Outside, night settled over the estate. Inside, two strangers stood on the edge of something neither had planned for, both knowing that the pretending had already started to feel dangerously, impossibly real. And the weekend had barely begun. The morning came too early, sunlight streaming through curtains Evan hadn't bothered to close. He woke disoriented, the unfamiliar weight of expensive linens and the absence of Mia's monitors momentarily making him panic before he remembered where he was. The cottage, the estate, the lie he was living. Victoria's door was already open when he emerged, her room empty and pristine as if she'd never slept there at all. He found her on the terrace, coffee in hand, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than his monthly rent, staring out at gardens that stretched toward a horizon she didn't seem to see. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She didn't startle, didn't turn. "I don't sleep much. Haven't in years." Evan poured himself coffee from the service that had appeared as if by magic, settling into the chair beside hers. The morning was cool, crisp, the kind of perfect that came from having staff to maintain it. "What time does the weekend officially start?" "Brunch at 10. My mother will want to parade us around, show you off to the extended family and their circle of friends. They'll ask invasive questions disguised as polite conversation, judge everything about you, and report back to my father." "Sounds delightful." Victoria's lips twitched. "It's a nightmare, but you're being paid well to endure it." The reminder stung more than it should have. Evan set down his cup. "About last night." "We don't need to discuss last night." Her voice went crisp, professional, the armor sliding back into place. "I was tired, vulnerable. It won't happen again." "Victoria, we should discuss our story instead. How we met, how long we've been together, the details people will expect." She finally turned to him, her expression carefully neutral. "I've prepared a document with the essential information." Of course she had, because Victoria Hale didn't do anything without preparation, without control, without reducing emotion to bullet points and contingency plans. "Fine," Evan said. "Let's hear it." They spent the next hour rehearsing lies. They'd met 6 months ago when Evan had designed marketing materials for one of Victoria's subsidiary companies. She'd noticed his work, reached out personally, been charmed by his dedication to his daughter. They'd taken things slowly because of Mia, because Victoria's work was demanding, because they both knew what they were building was worth protecting. It was a good story. Believable. Safe. And it made Evan feel sick because parts of it were starting to feel true. "One more thing," Victoria said, pulling out a small jewelry box. Inside was a simple silver bracelet, elegant and understated. "My mother will notice if you're not wearing something I gave you. She's observant that way." Evan took the bracelet, the metal cool against his fingers. "Did you pick this out?" "My assistant did." "Why?" "Just wondering if any part of this has your actual taste in it, or if it's all calculated for maximum believability." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "I don't know, does it?" They stared at each other, the morning light harsh between them, until Victoria looked away. "We should check on Mia before brunch." His daughter was already awake, Maria helping her into a dress that Victoria must have arranged. Mia looked like a different child. Healthy, vibrant, her color better than Evan had seen in months thanks to the estate's medical equipment and the oxygen they'd adjusted overnight. "Daddy, look!" Mia spun carefully, the dress flaring. "Isn't it pretty?" "You're beautiful, sweetheart." "Victoria brought it this morning. She said every girl should have a fancy dress for parties." Mia's smile was radiant. "Can I keep it?" Evan's eyes found Victoria standing in the doorway and caught the expression on her face before she could hide it, something raw and aching, like watching his daughter's joy hurt in ways she couldn't name. "Of course you can keep it," Victoria said softly. "It's yours." "Thank you." Mia crossed to her, wrapping thin arms around Victoria's waist in an impulsive hug. "You're the nicest person ever." Victoria froze, her hands hovering uncertainly before settling gently on Mia's shoulders. Evan watched her face transform, the careful control cracking, real emotion bleeding through, something that looked dangerously close to tears. "You're very welcome," Victoria managed, her voice unsteady. Mia pulled back, studying Victoria with that unsettling perceptiveness children sometimes had. "Are you sad?" "No, sweetheart. I'm happy." "Then why do you look like you're going to cry?" Victoria glanced at Evan, helpless, and he saw her completely undone by a 7-year-old's honesty. He moved to them, creating a unit, a family that looked real even if it wasn't. "Sometimes people cry when they're happy," Evan said gently, "like how Daddy cried when you woke up after your last surgery." "Oh," Mia considered this. "Okay, but Victoria, you should smile more. You're really pretty when you smile." Victoria did smile then, genuine and unguarded, and Evan felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to see her like this, vulnerable and real and achingly human beneath all that ice. "We should go," Victoria said, composing herself. "My mother gets irritable when people are late." Brunch was exactly the ordeal Victoria had promised. The main house's dining room was filled with people who existed in a world Evan would never belong to. Old money and older bloodlines, conversations about vacation homes and charity boards and investments that required more capital than he'd see in his lifetime. Victoria's mother held court at the head of the table, orchestrating introductions with practiced precision. Cousins and aunts and business associates, all studying Evan with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. He felt like a specimen under glass, something exotic and slightly suspicious. "So you're a graphic designer," Victoria's Aunt Patricia said, her tone suggesting she'd said sewer worker instead. "How quaint." "Freelance," Evan corrected. "I specialize in brand identity and digital marketing." "And that provides adequately for you and your daughter?" The question wasn't subtle. Evan felt Victoria stiffen beside him, her hand finding his under the table, squeezing hard enough to hurt. "I manage," he said evenly. "I'm sure Victoria's resources have been helpful." Patricia's smile was sharp. "She's always been generous with those less fortunate." "Patricia." Catherine's voice cut through the conversation like a judge's gavel. "Perhaps you could tell us about your recent difficulties with the Foundation's audit, instead of interrogating my daughter's guest." Patricia's face went red. The table fell silent, awkward and tense. Evan realized he'd just witnessed Catherine Hale defending him, protecting her daughter's choice even if she didn't approve. Victoria's hand remained in his, her thumb moving in small circles against his palm. An unconscious gesture, he thought, or maybe a deliberate one, grounding herself in something real while surrounded by performance. "Mr. Brooks?" Richard Hale's voice commanded attention from the other end of the table. "Victoria mentioned you're a single father. That must be challenging given your daughter's medical needs." Here it was, the real test. Evan met Richard's gaze steadily. "It is. But Mia's worth every difficult moment. Being her father is the greatest privilege of my life." "Even when it costs you everything else?" "There is nothing else. She's my daughter, my family. Everything I do is for her." Something flickered in Richard's expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "And Victoria? Where does she fit in this equation?" Evan glanced at the woman beside him, this brilliant, complicated person he barely knew and somehow understood too well. The lie they were supposed to tell sat ready on his tongue, but what came out was something closer to truth. Victoria sees Mia, really sees her, not as a sick kid or a burden or something to fix, but as a person, someone worth knowing. That matters more than I can say. Victoria's hand trembled in his. Under the table, where no one could see, he squeezed back. "And she sees you the same way, I hope," Catherine said quietly. "My daughter has spent so long building walls that I'd begun to think no one would ever get past them." "Mother, it's true, Victoria. You've made yourself so hard, so untouchable." Catherine's eyes were bright. "When you told me you were bringing someone, I didn't believe it. I thought it was another business maneuver, another calculated move. But the way you look at him—" "Can we not do this here?" Victoria's voice was strained. "Why not? Your father and I have spent 40 years building a life together. We've survived loss, grief, business disasters, and every challenge that comes with a long marriage. I want that for you, darling. I want you to have someone who sees past your armor." "I don't need—" "Everyone needs someone." Catherine looked at Evan. "My daughter is extraordinary, brilliant and driven and capable of building empires, but she's also terrified of being vulnerable, of needing anyone, because she thinks it makes her weak." "It does," Victoria said tightly. "No, sweetheart. It makes you human." The conversation moved on, other voices filling the silence, but Evan felt the weight of what had just happened. Catherine wasn't just accepting their relationship. She was blessing it, believing it, seeing something real in the performance they were giving. The guilt sat heavy in his stomach. After brunch, Victoria disappeared into her father's study for what she termed unavoidable business discussions, leaving Evan to navigate the estate's social landscape alone. He found himself on the terrace with Catherine, watching Mia play in the garden under Maria's watchful eye. "She's a lovely child," Catherine said. "So much light in her, despite everything she's endured." "She's stronger than I am," Evan admitted. "Strength comes in many forms. You've kept her alive, kept her happy, given her a childhood despite impossible circumstances. That's its own kind of extraordinary." Evan studied Catherine, trying to understand her angle, her game. "Why are you being kind to me? You don't know anything about me except what Victoria chose to share." "I know you love your daughter more than your own comfort. I know you look at Victoria like she's precious rather than useful. And I know my daughter is happier than I've seen her in 20 years. Catherine's smile was sad. "That's enough." "Mrs. Hale." "Catherine, please. We're practically family now." The word hit Evan like a physical blow. Family. Built on lies and contracts and money-changing hands. He thought of his actual family, Sarah's grave he visited every Sunday, Mia's medical team that knew them better than most relatives, the neighbor who watched his daughter out of kindness rather than obligation. "Can I ask you something?" Catherine's voice was gentle. "Why Victoria? You could have found someone easier, someone without her complications." Evan almost laughed. If she only knew. "She's worth the complications. That's what my husband said about me 40 years ago. I was running my family's company, had no interest in marriage or children, told him I was too busy for romance." Catherine's eyes distant with memory. "He pursued me anyway, wore me down with persistence and terrible poetry and a stubborn refusal to accept that I didn't need anyone." "What changed your mind?" "He did. Not by trying to fix me or change me, but by seeing who I actually was and deciding that was enough." She looked at Evan directly. "Victoria needs that. Someone who won't try to soften her edges or make her smaller to fit into their life. Someone who can stand beside her without being diminished by her light." "I'm not." "You are, though. I've watched her all morning. The way she reaches for your hand, the way she relaxes when you're near, the way she looks at your daughter like she's remembering how to feel. That's not nothing, Evan." Guilt clawed at his throat. This woman believed in something that didn't exist, saw love where there was only transaction. "Catherine, I need to tell you—" "Victoria was 10 when her brother died," Catherine's voice cracked. "She found him, after the accident. She was the one who called for help, who held his hand while we waited for paramedics who couldn't save him. She stopped being a child that day. Decided emotion was dangerous, that loving people made you vulnerable to unbearable pain." Evan's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Help her. Love her enough that she remembers how to love herself." Catherine gripped his hand. "My daughter is extraordinary, but she's also breaking. She needs someone to catch her before she shatters completely." Before Evan could respond, Mia's laughter rang across the garden. They both turned to see Victoria kneeling in the grass beside his daughter, both of them examining something in the flower bed. A caterpillar, probably, or a particularly interesting rock. Victoria's expensive clothes would be ruined, her carefully styled hair coming loose, but she didn't seem to care. "She's good with children," Catherine observed. "She says she's not." "My daughter says a lot of things that aren't true, mostly to herself." Catherine stood. "I'll leave you to it. But Evan, thank you for giving her this. Even if it's just for a weekend, you've given her something she desperately needed." She left him alone with his guilt and his conscience and the sound of his daughter's joy. That night, the estate held its anniversary celebration. The ballroom, because of course they had a ballroom, was filled with flowers and candlelight and people who belonged in magazine spreads. Evan wore the suit Victoria had arranged, tailored perfectly to fit him, expensive enough to make him blend with the wealth surrounding them. Victoria appeared at the top of the stairs in a dress that stole his breath. Deep blue, simple in cut, but devastating in execution, making her look like something from a dream. Her hair was swept up, revealing the graceful line of her neck, and for a moment Evan forgot how to speak. "You're staring," she said, descending toward him. "You're stunning." "It's just a dress." "No," Evan said quietly. "It's not." Something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, maybe, or fear. She took his offered arm, her touch light. "Ready to perform? Is that what we're doing?" "Isn't it?" The party was everything Evan had never experienced. Champagne that cost more than his rent, food prepared by chefs whose names he should probably recognize, music from a live orchestra that played with casual perfection. Victoria moved through it all with practiced grace, introducing him, making small talk, playing the role of devoted girlfriend with convincing precision. But he noticed the cracks, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes, the tension in her shoulders when people congratulated her on finally settling down, the small flinch when her father toasted their happiness with words that felt more like warning than blessing. "Dance with me," Evan said when the orchestra shifted to something slow. I know, but your mother is watching, and this is what couples do." Victoria let him lead her to the floor, her body stiff in his arms. They moved together awkwardly at first, two people pretending at intimacy they didn't feel. But gradually, she relaxed, her hand settling more firmly in his, her body finding the rhythm of his. "I hate this," she whispered. "The dancing. All of it. The performance. The expectations. Pretending to be someone I'm not." Evan pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes. "Who are you pretending to be? Someone who fits? Someone who can have both, the career and the relationship, the success and the family. Someone who isn't fundamentally broken." "You're not broken. You don't know that. I know you spent your morning playing in the dirt with my daughter. I know you fought your father to defend a stranger's dignity. I know you look at Mia like she matters, like her joy is worth protecting." His voice softened. "That's not broken, Victoria. That's human." She stumbled, just slightly, her composure cracking. "This isn't real. You know that, right? Whatever you're feeling, whatever this looks like, it's not real." "Then why does it feel like it is?" "Because you want it to be. Because your daughter is sick and your life is hard, and I represent something stable and safe." Victoria's voice was harsh, defensive. "But I'm not safe, Evan. I'm a transaction, a contract, $50,000 for one weekend of pretending." "Is that what you tell yourself?" "It's the truth." "Then why are you shaking?" Victoria pulled away from him abruptly, stepping back like he'd burned her. Around them, other couples continued dancing, oblivious to the small drama unfolding. "I need air." She disappeared through the terrace doors before he could stop her. Evan followed, finding her at the far edge of the garden, her arms wrapped around herself, staring up at stars obscured by the glow of the party. "I'm sorry," he said. "I pushed too hard." "You're supposed to push. That's the arrangement. Make it believable. Make them think we're real." "And if it's becoming real?" "It can't." Victoria turned to him, her face stark in the moonlight. "It can't, Evan. Because in 2 days, you go back to your life and I go back to mine. And this weekend becomes a story we tell ourselves about what might have been if circumstances were different. What if circumstances could be different? They can't. You need money I'm providing. I need appearances you're giving. Remove those factors, and what's left? A billionaire CEO and a struggling single father with nothing in common except one weekend of pretending. You really believe that?" "I have to believe that. Because the alternative," her voice broke. "The alternative terrifies me." Evan closed the distance between them, close enough to see the fear in her eyes, the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. "What if I'm terrified too?" "Then we're both fools." "Probably. But I'd rather be a fool who tried than someone who spent the rest of his life wondering what might have happened if he'd been brave enough to be honest." "Honest about what?" "About this." He gestured between them. "About the fact that somewhere between your sterile contract and my daughter falling asleep tonight asking if you were going to be her new mommy, this stopped being pretend for me." Victoria's breath caught. "Evan, I'm not asking for anything. I'm not expecting anything. I just need you to know that when I look at you, I don't see a transaction. I see someone extraordinary trying very hard to convince herself she doesn't deserve to be loved. You don't love me. You can't. You don't even know me. You're right. I don't know your favorite color, or what you drink besides coffee, or whether you prefer books or movies. But I know you bought my daughter a dress because you remembered what it felt like to be young and want something beautiful. I know you stood up to your father to protect my dignity. I know you're brilliant and terrified and so carefully controlled it's like watching someone hold their breath waiting for the world to end. Stop. Why? Because I'm right? Because you're making this complicated when it's supposed to be simple. Life is complicated, Victoria. People are complicated. And sometimes the most honest thing we can do is admit we don't have all the answers. She stared at him, tears tracking down her cheeks, her perfect composure finally, completely shattered. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone in without losing everything I've built. Maybe you don't have to choose. Maybe there's a version of your life where you get to be successful and vulnerable, powerful and loved. That's not real. That's a fairy tale. My wife used to say that the best stories are the ones we tell ourselves about who we could become. Evan's voice was gentle. You've told yourself you have to be alone to be strong. What if that's just another story? Victoria's sob was broken, raw. What if I try and it destroys me? What if I let you in and lose everything? What if you don't and regret it forever? She launched herself at him, her kiss desperate and fierce, tasting of salt and champagne and something that felt dangerously like hope. Evan caught her, held her, kissed her back with equal desperation, and somewhere in the back of his mind knew they'd just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. When they finally broke apart, Victoria was trembling. This is a mistake. Probably. We should stop. We should. Neither of them moved. Around them, the party continued, music and laughter drifting through the night. But in the garden, two people stood on the edge of something they couldn't name, both knowing that pretending had become impossible. I don't know what happens now, Victoria whispered. Neither do I. I'm still paying you. I know. This doesn't change the contract. Okay. Evan, let's just get through tonight, he said gently. One thing at a time. They returned to the party hand in hand, their performance now something else entirely. Catherine saw them and smiled, knowing and sad. Richard watched with something that might have been approval or warning, and Evan felt the weight of what they'd started, knowing that when Monday came and reality returned, they'd both have to face what they'd built from lies. But tonight, in the glow of celebration and surrounded by people who believed in their fiction, Evan let himself pretend it was real, let himself hold Victoria close during the last dance, breathe in her perfume, feel her heartbeat against his chest. Let himself fall in love with a woman he was supposed to be fooling. Later, back in their cottage, with Mia sleeping peacefully in the next room, Victoria stood at the window again, her silhouette stark against the darkness. I haven't let myself feel anything in so long, she said quietly. I don't know if I remember how. Evan crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, feeling her lean into him. Then we'll figure it out together. What if we can't? What if we can? She turned in his arms, her face vulnerable in ways he'd never seen. This weekend was supposed to solve my problems. Instead, it's created entirely new ones. Good problems or bad problems? I don't know yet. Her smile was tentative, fragile. Ask me Monday. Deal. They stood together in the darkness, the weekend half over, the pretending long since abandoned for something infinitely more dangerous. Outside, the estate settled into silence. Inside, two people who'd agreed to a lie found themselves facing a truth neither had anticipated. And in the morning, everything would get infinitely more complicated. Morning came with a phone call that shattered whatever fragile peace they'd found in the darkness. Victoria's phone buzzed at 6 a.m., vibrating against the nightstand with an urgency that pulled her from the first genuine sleep she'd had in months. Evan felt her stiffen beside him. They'd fallen asleep tangled together on the couch, neither willing to acknowledge what that meant, before she grabbed the device with shaking hands. What? Her voice was sharp, instantly awake. Then her face went white. When? How bad? Evan sat up, alarm cutting through the early morning fog. Victoria was already moving, pacing the room with predatory intensity, her body language shifting from vulnerable woman to corporate warrior in seconds. I don't care what Marcus says. Freeze the accounts, lock down the servers, and get our legal team on this immediately. She paused, listening. No, I'll handle the board. You focus on containment. She hung up, her hand trembling as she lowered the phone. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing hard, before the mask slammed back into place. What happened? Evan asked. Corporate espionage. Someone accessed our proprietary systems overnight, stole research worth approximately $200 million. Her voice was flat, controlled, but he could see the fury beneath. My head of security thinks it was an inside job. I'm sorry. Don't be. This is what I deal with. She moved toward her room, already mentally gone from him, from the cottage, from whatever they'd started the night before. I need to get back to the city. There's a car. Victoria, wait. She stopped, her back to him. I don't have time for this. I know, but just... Evan crossed to her, turning her gently to face him. Whatever happened last night, whatever this is, it doesn't disappear because your company is in crisis. It has to. This is exactly why I don't do relationships, Evan. I can't afford the distraction. I'm not asking you to choose. I'm asking you to breathe for 5 seconds and let someone help you. Victoria's laugh was bitter. How? How can you possibly help with industrial espionage and corporate sabotage and the very real possibility that I'm about to lose everything I've built? I can't, but I can make sure you don't do it alone. I've always done it alone. And how's that working out for you? She flinched like he'd slapped her. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is you using your company as an excuse to run away every time something gets real between us. There is no us. There's a contract that expires tomorrow and a weekend that's already gone completely off the rails. Victoria pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. I need to go. Tell my parents I had an emergency, apologize to Mia, and... Daddy? They both froze. Mia stood in the doorway of her room, Maria hovering worriedly behind her, the little girl's face confused and sleepy. Is Victoria leaving? The question was innocent, but it cut through Evan like a blade. He watched Victoria's face transform, the corporate armor cracking to reveal something agonized beneath. I have to, sweetheart, Victoria said, her voice unsteady. Something happened at work that I need to fix. But you'll come back, right? Mia moved toward her with that complete trust children had, reaching for Victoria's hand. You promised we'd pick flowers today, for the anniversary table. Victoria crouched down, bringing herself to Mia's level, and Evan saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Mia. I know I promised. Is your work more important than us? The question hung in the air, devastating in its simplicity. Evan started to intervene, to explain that sometimes adults had responsibilities, but Victoria spoke first. No, she whispered. No, it's not. Then stay. Please? Mia's lower lip trembled. I know I'm sick and we're not really your family, but I thought maybe you liked us anyway. Victoria's composure shattered completely. She pulled Mia into a fierce hug, her body shaking with the force of emotion she'd suppressed for 2 decades. I do like you so much. Her voice broke. You're one of the best people I've ever met. Then why are you leaving? Because I'm scared, Victoria admitted, the words raw and honest. Because I don't know how to be what you need. You just have to be you. Mia pulled back, studying Victoria with those 2 wise eyes. That's what Daddy says. You just have to be yourself and let people love you. Evan's chest tightened, watching his daughter offer wisdom he barely possessed himself, watching Victoria unravel under the simple truth of it. I need to make some calls, Victoria said finally. Give me 30 minutes. Can you do that, sweetheart? Mia nodded, satisfied, and let Maria guide her back to bed. The moment they were alone, Victoria turned to Evan, her face streaked with tears she didn't bother hiding anymore. I can't do this. I can't be what she thinks I am. She thinks you're someone worth loving. That's it. Nothing more complicated. Everything is more complicated. My company is under attack. My board will use this crisis to question my leadership, and I just promised a 7-year-old I'd stay to pick flowers instead of protecting everything I've built. She laughed, the sound broken. I'm losing my mind. Or maybe you're finding it. Evan moved to her, cupping her face gently. Make your calls. Handle what you can remotely, and then decide what actually matters. What if I choose wrong? What if there's no wrong choice? What if you get to have both, the company and the life outside it? Victoria searched his face like she was looking for proof that such a thing was possible. Then she kissed him, brief and desperate, before pulling away. 30 minutes. Then we'll see. Those 30 minutes turned into 2 hours of Victoria on the phone, pacing the cottage terrace in her pajamas. her voice cutting and precise as she orchestrated damage control from 300 miles away. Evan listened while pretending not to, making breakfast, helping Mia with her medications, marveling at how someone could be both terrifying and magnificent at once. Freeze Marcus's access. I don't care if he's been with the company for 15 years. He had opportunity and motive. Victoria's voice was ice. Get forensics on every device he's touched in the last 6 months. If he so much as sneezed near classified information, I want to know about it. A pause. Then, softer. No. Don't call the police yet. If this leaks before we have solid evidence, the stock price will tank and we'll lose more than the research. Another pause. Because I'm not sacrificing innocent employees to save face. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. She hung up, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion, and turned to find Evan watching her. What? Nothing. Just seeing you work? It's not pretty. It's impressive as hell. He handed her coffee, which she accepted gratefully. Any progress? Maybe. We've identified 3 people with access and motive, running deep background checks now, combing through communications, financial records, everything. She sipped the coffee, her eyes distant. This is what I do, Evan. Crisis management at 3 a.m, impossible decisions, choosing between bad options and worse ones. It's not glamorous. I never thought it was, but you're good at it. I'm good at being alone, at making hard choices without worrying about how they affect anyone else. She looked toward Mia's room. But that little girl in there, she makes me want to be different, and that terrifies me more than losing my company. Before Evan could respond, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Mr. Brooks, this is Dr. Chen from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm calling about Mia's upcoming surgery. Evan's blood went cold. Is something wrong? We've had a scheduling conflict. I know this is short notice, but we have an opening on Tuesday if you can make it work. The surgical team is available, and frankly, given Mia's recent test results, I'd prefer not to wait the full 6 weeks. What test results? She's been stable. The routine blood work we ran last month showed some concerning markers. Nothing immediately dangerous, but waiting too long could complicate the procedure. Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. I sent the report to your email 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, when Evan had been so buried under bills and desperation that he'd probably deleted it thinking it was another collection notice. I didn't see it. How concerning are we talking? Let's just say Tuesday is better than 6 weeks from now. Can you make it work financially? I know the insurance situation is complicated. Evan looked at Victoria, who was watching him with sharp attention, reading his body language even without hearing the conversation. $25,000 in his account. The surgery would cost at least $40,000. He'd been planning to negotiate payment plans, beg for charity care, find some way to bridge the gap. I'll make it work, he said. Tuesday. We'll be there. He hung up to find Victoria already moving, her phone back in her hand. How much do you need? Victoria, how much, Evan? For the surgery, for whatever complications might arise, for the recovery care? I can't take more money from you. This isn't about the contract. This is about Mia. Her voice shook. Tell me how much. 40,000. Maybe more if there are complications. Victoria dialed without hesitation. Jennifer, it's Victoria Hale. I need you to wire $50,000 to Evan Brooks's account immediately. Use my personal funds, not company money. A pause. No, I don't need board approval for my personal finances. Just do it. Today. Victoria, stop. Evan grabbed her wrist gently. You can't just throw money at this. Watch me. I'm serious. We're not... He struggled for words. The contract was for 1 weekend. For $50,000 total. You can't give me another $50 just because my daughter needs surgery. Why not? Because then it becomes something else. Something I can't accept. Victoria lowered her phone, her expression fierce. What if I want it to be something else? What if I want to help because I care about that little girl, because I care about you, because for the first time in 20 years I actually give a damn about someone other than myself? Then it's not a transaction anymore. It's a relationship. And relationships come with expectations and obligations and the very real possibility of breaking each other. I know. She moved closer, her free hand finding his. And I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of letting you walk away because I was too much of a coward to admit I want this. Want what exactly? Because 48 hours ago, this was a business arrangement. Now you're offering to pay for my daughter's surgery, and I don't know if that's kindness or guilt or something else entirely. It's love, you idiot. The words burst out of her raw and unguarded. It's me falling in love with you and your daughter in this impossible situation. And I don't know how to process that because I spent 20 years convincing myself I didn't need anyone. The silence that followed was deafening. Evan stared at her, this powerful woman undone by her own honesty, and felt something click into place in his chest. Say that again, he whispered. I'm not repeating it. Once was humiliating enough. Victoria, forget I said anything. I'll transfer the money as a loan. You can pay me back whenever. He kissed her, cutting off her spiral, pouring every complicated emotion of the last 2 days into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, Victoria was crying again, her careful control completely abandoned. I don't know how to do this, she said against his mouth. I don't know how to be vulnerable without falling apart. Then we'll figure it out together. Messy and complicated and probably a disaster, but together. What about your daughter? What if I hurt her? What if you don't? What if you're exactly what we both need? Victoria pulled back, searching his face. You're not in love with me. You can't be. We barely know each other. I know you bought Mia a dress because you remembered what it felt like to want something beautiful. I know you stood up to your father to protect my dignity. I know you're brilliant and terrified and so desperate to be seen as more than a balance sheet that you hired a fake boyfriend rather than risk real rejection. Evan's voice softened. That's enough to build on, isn't it? It should be insane. This should be insane. Probably, but I'd rather have insane and real than perfect and fake. She kissed him again, softer this time, like she was memorizing the feeling. When Mia called from the other room asking about breakfast, they broke apart reluctantly, the real world intruding on their impossible bubble. The rest of Sunday unfolded with strange normality. Victoria made her calls, managing her crisis from the cottage, while Evan and Mia picked flowers in the garden. Catherine found them there, Mia carefully selecting blooms while explaining their meanings with the confidence of someone who'd memorized every flower book in her father's modest collection. She's lovely, Catherine said to Evan, watching Mia debate between roses and lilies. She is. And Victoria, she's staying? For now. Her company is dealing with some issues, but she's handling it remotely. Catherine's smile was knowing. That must be difficult for her. She's never been good at delegating when things get complicated. She's learning. Thanks to you, I think. Catherine touched his arm gently. I want you to know, whatever happens after this weekend, you've given my daughter something precious. Hope, maybe, or the possibility of it. Guilt twisted in Evan's gut. This woman believed in something that had started as a lie, had faith in a relationship built on contracts and desperation. Mrs. Hale, Catherine, there's something you should know. That this weekend was supposed to be a business arrangement? Catherine's tone was mild. I'm not blind, Evan, or stupid. I know my daughter well enough to recognize when she's orchestrating appearances. Evan's throat went dry. You knew? I suspected from the moment she called to say she was bringing someone. Victoria doesn't do spontaneous. Every move she makes is calculated, planned, designed for maximum effect. Catherine's expression softened. But somewhere between the calculation and the execution, something real happened. I saw it in how she looked at your daughter, how she looked at you. That doesn't make it right. We lied to you. You did. And I'm choosing to forgive that because the outcome matters more than the method. She looked toward the cottage where Victoria stood on the terrace, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing emphatically. My daughter has been alone for so long. If it took a fake relationship to crack her armor, then I'm grateful for the deception. Even knowing it might not last? Especially knowing that, because at least she tried. At least she let herself feel something. Catherine's eyes were bright. Do you love her? The question hung between them, impossible to dodge. Evan watched Victoria pace, watched her run agitated hands through her hair, watched her be magnificent and messy and completely, devastatingly real. Yeah, he said quietly. I think I do. Then fight for her, because my daughter will find every excuse to push you away, to convince herself this can't work, to choose the safer path of being alone. Catherine gripped his hand. Don't let her. Make her choose you. Before he could respond, Mia ran over with an armful of flowers, her face flushed with exertion and joy. Look what I picked. Can we put them on the anniversary table? They're perfect, sweetheart, Catherine said warmly. Let's arrange them together. The anniversary dinner that evening was smaller than the previous night's celebration. Just family, Victoria's parents had said, though their definition of family included aunts and uncles and cousins who filled the formal dining room with noise and laughter. Mia sat between Evan and Victoria, delighted to be included, chattering about the flowers she'd picked and the fish she'd seen in the estate's pond. Victoria's hand found Evan's under the table, squeezing tight, grounding herself in his presence. He noticed how she relaxed when Mia told a story, how she smiled when his daughter laughed, how she was slowly, carefully letting herself be part of something beyond corporate strategy and calculated moves. Victoria tells me you're having surgery on Tuesday, Richard said to Mia, his tone gentler than Evan had heard before. Mia nodded seriously. For my heart. It's not working right, so the doctors have to fix it. That sounds scary. It is. But Daddy says brave people do scary things all the time. She looked at Victoria. And Victoria will be there, so I won't be alone. Evan felt Victoria stiffen beside him. They hadn't discussed Tuesday, hadn't planned that far, hadn't acknowledged what would happen when the weekend ended and reality returned. Will she? Richard's gaze pinned his daughter. Will you be there, Victoria? Victoria's voice faltered. Evan watched her struggle, watched her weigh obligations and expectations, and the very real crisis at her company against a 7-year-old's hope. Yes, I'll be there. Mia's smile was radiant. Promise? I promise. The dinner continued around them, but Evan barely tasted the food, too focused on the woman beside him who just made a commitment that terrified her. When the meal finally ended and Mia was taken to bed by Maria, exhausted but happy, Victoria disappeared onto the terrace. He found her there 20 minutes later, staring out at darkness, her shoulders rigid with tension. You didn't have to promise her that, he said quietly. I know. She would have understood if you said you couldn't be there. Would she? Or would she have understood that her feelings don't matter as much as my company? Victoria's voice was harsh. I saw her face, Evan, that hope, that trust, and I couldn't take that from her. Even though it means being there during one of the biggest crises your company has faced? Even though. She turned to him, her face stark in the moonlight. My head of security thinks the leak came from Marcus Chen, my VP of development. We've worked together for 8 years. I trusted him with everything, access codes, proprietary research, strategic plans, and he sold me out for what we estimate is about $5 million from a competitor. I'm sorry. Don't be. I should have seen it coming. Should have recognized the signs, should have been more careful about who I trusted. Her laugh was bitter. Story of my life, really. Trust the wrong people, get betrayed, build higher walls. Or trust the right people and build something real. And how do I know which is which? How do I know you're not just another Marcus, taking what you can get before disappearing? The accusation stung, but Evan understood it for what it was. Fear disguised as cynicism, vulnerability masked as attack. You don't. That's what trust is, choosing to believe anyway. That's terrifying. Yeah, it is. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. But I'm here, Victoria. Tuesday, and whatever comes after, I'm here. She clung to him, her body shaking with suppressed sobs. What if I fail? What if I can't be what Mia needs, what you need? What if I'm too broken to make this work? Then we'll fail together, and we'll get back up and try again. Evan pulled back, meeting her eyes. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You run a multi-billion-dollar company. You survived losing your brother. You've built an empire from nothing while everyone told you it was impossible. His voice was fierce. You're strong enough for anything. Victoria's kiss was desperate, claiming a promise and a plea all at once. When they finally broke apart, she was crying openly, 20 years of suppressed emotion finally finding release. "I'm going to hurt you," she whispered. "I don't know how yet, but I will. I'm not good at this." "Then we'll learn together." They stood wrapped in each other as the night deepened around them, two people who'd started as strangers and somehow become essential, both knowing that tomorrow they'd have to face the world beyond the estate's careful boundaries. But tonight, they had this: the honesty, the fear, the impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, they could make it work. Inside, Catherine watched from the window, her husband's arms around her, both of them bearing witness to their daughter's transformation. "She loves him," Richard said, surprise coloring his voice. "She does, finally." Catherine leaned into her husband. "Do you think they'll make it?" "I think they'll try. That's all anyone can ask." In Mia's room, the little girl slept peacefully, dreaming of flowers and big houses, and a woman with sad eyes who smiled when Mia made her laugh. Her heart monitor beeped steadily, strong for now, counting down the hours until Tuesday when everything would change. And in the cottage, Evan and Victoria lay tangled together on the couch again, both too afraid to sleep, too aware that morning would bring complications they weren't ready to face. "What happens now?" Victoria whispered into the darkness. "Now we go home. You fight for your company. Mia has her surgery. And we figure out what this is when we're not pretending for your parents. What if it falls apart? What if it doesn't?" She turned in his arms, her face inches from his. "I'm going to need you to be patient with me. I'm going to panic and push you away and convince myself this can't work. Probably multiple times." "Okay? Okay? That's it? What else do you want me to say? That I'll fight for you even when you're fighting against yourself? That I'll remind you every day that you're worth loving even when you can't see it? That I'm not going anywhere even when you try to make me leave?" Evan's voice was steady, certain. "Because I will. All of it. For as long as you'll let me." Victoria's breath hitched. "Why?" "Because my wife told me once that the best love is the kind that makes you braver than you thought you could be. And you make me brave, Victoria. You and everything you are, everything you're afraid to be. That's worth fighting for." "I'm going to hurt you," she said again, like a warning, like a confession. "Probably. And I'll probably hurt you too. That's what people do when they love each other. Make mistakes, say the wrong thing, fail each other in small and large ways. But we'll also make each other better, stronger, more than we are alone." "You sound very certain for someone whose daughter just asked if her fake girlfriend was going to be her new mother." Evan smiled despite the fear in his chest. "Mia sees what I see. Someone worth keeping." They fell asleep like that, wrapped together, both knowing that morning would be impossibly complicated and choosing to face it anyway. When dawn came, it came with shouting. Evan jerked awake to the sound of Maria's voice, high and terrified, calling his name from Mia's room. He was on his feet before conscious thought caught up, Victoria right behind him, both of them stumbling through the pre-dawn darkness. Mia was seizing, her small body convulsed on the bed, monitors screaming, Maria already on the phone with emergency services. Evan's training kicked in. Turn her on her side, protect her head, time the seizure, while his heart shattered into 1,000 pieces watching his daughter's body betray her. "How long?" Victoria's voice cut through his panic, sharp and focused. 90 seconds, Maria said, her professionalism barely masking her fear. "Ambulance is 3 minutes out. Call ahead to the hospital. Tell them we're coming in hot with a 7-year-old cardiac patient. Active seizure, history of congenital heart defect." Victoria was already moving, grabbing Mia's medical bag, checking supplies with practiced efficiency that suggested she'd done this before. "Evan, I need you to breathe. Can you do that for me?" He couldn't. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but watch his daughter suffer and know he was powerless to stop it. This was every parent's nightmare made real. The moment when love wasn't enough. When wanting to protect her didn't matter because biology and fate had other plans. The seizure stopped at 2 minutes 15 seconds. Mia went limp, unconscious but breathing, her small chest rising and falling with terrible fragility. Evan gathered her into his arms, feeling how light she was, how breakable. "Stay with me, baby," he whispered against her hair. "Please stay with me." The ambulance arrived with sirens that shattered the estate's peaceful morning. Paramedics swarmed the cottage, asking questions. Evan answered automatically while some distant part of him watched Victoria coordinate with the medical team, watched her transform into someone who knew exactly what to do in a crisis. "We need a transport now," the lead paramedic said. "Sir, you can ride with us, but I'm coming too." Victoria's tone brooked no argument. "I'm family." Nobody questioned her. They loaded Mia into the ambulance with terrifying efficiency, Evan climbing in after, Victoria right behind him. The ride to the hospital was a blur of medical jargon and beeping equipment, and his daughter's too pale face against the white sheets. "Daddy?" Mia's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes fluttering open. "I'm here, sweetheart. Right here." "What happened?" "You had a seizure, baby, but you're okay. We're getting you help." "I'm scared." Her hand found his, so small and cold. "Don't leave me." "Never. I promise." He looked at Victoria, who sat on Mia's other side, her face composed but her hands shaking where she gripped the edge of the gurney. "We're both here." Mia's eyes found Victoria. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed." Victoria's voice cracked. "I promised, didn't I?" The emergency room was chaos. Doctors converged the moment they arrived, whisking Mia away for tests while Evan stood helpless in the hallway, covered in his daughter's fear sweat, shaking so hard he couldn't stand properly. Victoria caught him before he fell, her arms strong and sure around him. "She's going to be okay," Victoria said fiercely. "They know what they're doing." "You don't know that. Nobody knows that." "You're right. I don't. But I know she's a fighter and she has you, and right now that has to be enough." They waited. Minutes stretched into hours while doctors ran tests, consulted with specialists, debated treatment options and medical terminology that Evan only half understood. Victoria stayed beside him, making calls to reschedule her meetings, coordinating with her assistant to handle the corporate crisis remotely, never once suggesting she needed to leave. Dr. Chen appeared finally, her expression grave. "Mr. Brooks, we need to talk." Evan's knees went weak. How bad? The seizure was triggered by cardiac arrhythmia. Her heart is failing faster than we anticipated. Dr. Chen pulled up scans on her tablet, showing him images that looked like abstract art but meant everything. "The markers we saw 3 weeks ago have progressed significantly. We need to do the surgery today, not Tuesday." "Today? But you said—" "I know what I said, but if we wait, we risk another seizure, possibly stroke, possibly worse." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I've already contacted the surgical team. We can have her in the OR in 3 hours, if you consent." Evan couldn't breathe. 3 hours. His daughter would be in surgery in 3 hours. Her chest cracked open, her heart exposed and vulnerable, while strangers tried to repair what genetics had broken. "What are her chances?" Victoria asked when Evan couldn't form words. "The surgery itself has a 92% success rate, but given her current instability, her weakened state, the complications from the seizure," Dr. Chen hesitated. "I'd say we're looking at 75%, maybe 80% if everything goes perfectly. 20% chance his daughter wouldn't wake up. 1 in 5 that he'd lose her the way he'd lost Sarah, that he'd be alone again, that the light in his life would be extinguished before she ever got to grow up." "Do it," he heard himself say. "Whatever she needs, do it." The consent forms were endless. Pages of risks and complications and terrible possibilities he had to initial and sign, acknowledging that he understood his daughter might die, that the surgery might fail, that he was gambling everything on the skill of people he'd never met. Victoria read every word with him, her hand steady on his shoulder, translating medical jargon into plain English, asking questions he was too terrified to voice. When he finally signed the last page, his hand was shaking so badly the signature was barely legible. "I need to see her," he said, "before they take her." They led him into the pre-op room where Mia lay, tiny in the hospital gown, IV lines already threading into her small arms. She looked so young, so fragile, and Evan's heart cracked open seeing her like this. "Hey, sweetheart." He tried to smile, tried to be brave for her. "How are you feeling?" "Sleepy. They gave me medicine." Her words slurred slightly. "Am I going to have surgery now?" "Yeah, baby. Today instead of Tuesday. The doctors want to fix your heart sooner." "Will it hurt?" You'll be asleep, so you won't feel anything. And when you wake up, I'll be right there." Mia's eyes drifted to Victoria, who stood at the foot of the bed looking like she was fighting her own battle with composure. "Will Victoria be there too?" Victoria moved closer, her hand finding Mia's, holding on like the connection mattered more than anything. "I'll be there. I promise." "Good." Mia's smile was drowsy, trusting. "I'm glad you're my daddy's girlfriend. He's been sad for so long. But you make him smile." Evan's throat closed. Victoria's face transformed, something breaking behind her careful control. "You make me smile too," Victoria whispered. "You're the bravest person I know." "Braver than you?" "Much braver. You face scary things every day and you still find reasons to laugh. That's real courage." Mia's eyes were closing, the pre-medication pulling her under. "Tell Daddy not to be scared. I'm going to be okay. I promised Mommy I'd take care of him." The words hit Evan like a physical blow. His daughter, his 7-year-old daughter, who was about to have her chest cracked open, was worried about taking care of him. He bent over her bed, pressing his forehead to hers, breathing in her familiar scent. "I love you, Mia. More than anything in this world." "I love you too, Daddy. See you when I wake up." They wheeled her away, and Evan stood in the empty room feeling like his heart had left with her. Victoria's arms came around him from behind, holding him together when he wanted to fall apart. "She's going to be okay," Victoria said again, like saying it enough times would make it true. "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it anyway." They made their way to the surgical waiting room, a sterile space filled with uncomfortable chairs and terrible coffee and other people's fear. Evan collapsed into his seat, his head in his hands, trying to remember how to breathe. Victoria sat beside him, her phone in her lap, emails and messages piling up from her company. The crisis that had seemed so urgent yesterday now felt impossibly distant compared to the surgery happening floors above them. "You should go," Evan said quietly. "Handle your company. I know you need to." "I'm not going anywhere." "Victoria, your VP just stole $200 million worth of research. Your board is probably in revolt. You need to be there." "I need to be here." She set her phone aside, screen down, silencing it completely. "Everything else can wait." "Can it? You've spent 20 years building that company. You can't just walk away because the woman I love is having surgery?" Victoria turned to him, her expression fierce. "Because a 7-year-old who trusted me enough to call me family needs me to be here when she wakes up?" "Yes, Evan. It can wait. All of it. You'll regret it. Maybe. But I'd regret leaving more." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "My whole life I've chosen work over everything else, over relationships, over health, over any chance at actual happiness. And where has it gotten me? Alone in a penthouse, surrounded by success that means nothing because there's nobody to share it with. That's not true. Your company matters. The people you employ, the technology you're developing, it matters. But it's not everything, and I'm tired of pretending it is." Victoria's voice shook. "Mia asked me yesterday what my favorite color was, and I couldn't answer. I couldn't remember the last time I thought about something that trivial, that human. That's not strength, Evan. That's emptiness dressed up as ambition." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm choosing this. You, Mia, the terrifying possibility that I might actually get to have a life outside my company." She squeezed his hand. "I'm choosing to be here, even though it scares me more than any board meeting or corporate crisis ever has." Evan pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and let himself break down. The fear, the exhaustion, the terrible weight of loving someone so much that losing them would destroy you. It all came pouring out in wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. Victoria held him, her own tears soaking into his shoulder, both of them falling apart in a hospital waiting room while upstairs surgeons worked to save his daughter's life. Hours passed. The surgical team sent updates periodically. They'd started the procedure, initial incision successful, heart-lung bypass established, beginning the actual repair. Each update was both relief and renewed terror, confirmation that Mia was still alive but reminder that she wasn't safe yet. Victoria's phone buzzed incessantly, messages from her legal team, her board, her assistant. She ignored them all, her attention focused entirely on Evan, on being present when he needed her most. You should at least read them, he said during hour 3. Make sure nothing's actively on fire. Everything is actively on fire. That's just how corporate crises work. But she picked up the phone, scanning messages with increasing tension. Marcus has disappeared. They think he fled the country. Can they stop him? Eventually, we've frozen his accounts, notified the authorities, put out alerts. But if he got the money offshore before we caught on, she shook her head. It doesn't matter right now. It matters to you. Less than this does. She set the phone down again. I can rebuild stolen research. I can't rebuild... Her voice broke. I can't rebuild what we have if I'm not here when you need me. Evan studied her, this woman who'd entered his life through a desperate online posting and somehow become essential. When did you get so wise? About 5 minutes ago, when I realized I was about to lose everything that actually matters by clinging to things that don't. Victoria managed a trembling smile. Your daughter is a good teacher. She sees things clearly. She does. Sarah used to say Mia had an old soul, that she understood things about life and love that most adults never figured out. His voice caught. She'd like you, I think, Sarah. She'd appreciate how you don't coddle Mia, how you treat her like a person instead of a tragedy. Tell me about her, Sarah. So Evan did. Talked about meeting Sarah in college, how she'd been studying marine biology, and he'd been failing calculus until she tutored him. How they'd gotten married too young and been too broke for a proper honeymoon, but hadn't cared because they had each other. How she'd wanted children desperately, how the miscarriages had nearly destroyed her, how Mia's birth had felt like a miracle until they learned about the heart defect. She blamed herself, he said quietly, for passing on the gene, for making Mia sick. I told her it wasn't her fault, that we couldn't have known, but she carried that guilt until the cancer took her. His hands clenched. The worst part was watching her give up, watching her decide she didn't deserve to fight because our daughter was sick and it was her fault. That must have been unbearable. It was, but it also taught me something important, that love isn't about deserving, it's about choosing every single day to show up for the people who matter. He looked at Victoria. You're showing up, even though it's terrifying, even though it could all fall apart. That matters. Before Victoria could respond, Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, still in her surgical scrubs, her mask pulled down. Evan's heart stopped, his entire world narrowing to her expression, trying to read hope or devastation in her tired eyes. The surgery was successful, Dr. Chen said, and Evan's knees gave out. Victoria caught him, held him up, both of them trembling with relief. We repaired the valve, reinforced the chamber wall, and her heart is beating strong. She's in recovery now. Can I see her? In about 30 minutes. She's still intubated, and she'll look rough for a few days, but she came through beautifully. Dr. Chen's smile was genuine. Your daughter is a fighter, Mr. Brooks. She's going to be okay. The next hours blurred together. Seeing Mia in recovery, tiny and pale with tubes and wires connecting her to machines that breathed for her, monitored her, kept her alive. Watching her vital signs strengthen, her color improve, waiting for the moment when they could remove the breathing tube and she could wake up on her own. Victoria never left. She stood vigil beside Evan, her hand in his, occasionally stepping out to make terse phone calls about her company, but always returning within minutes. Catherine and Richard appeared briefly, bringing food Evan couldn't eat and support he desperately needed. She's going to pull through, Catherine said, studying Mia's sleeping face. She has too much of you in her to do anything else. When they finally extubated Mia 18 hours after surgery, Evan held his breath waiting for her to wake. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, unfocused and confused, before landing on him. Daddy? Her voice was hoarse from the breathing tube, barely audible. I'm here, baby. Right here. Did they fix my heart? They did. You're going to be okay. Mia's gaze drifted to Victoria, who stood at the foot of the bed looking like she'd aged a decade in the last 24 hours. You stayed. Of course I stayed. I promised, remember? Good. Mia's smile was weak but real. I knew you would. You don't break promises. Something shifted in Victoria's expression, a kind of breaking open, a surrender to emotions she'd suppressed for 20 years. She moved to Mia's bedside, taking her small hand carefully, mindful of the IV lines. I'm so proud of you, Victoria whispered. You were so brave. I wasn't brave, I was scared. Being brave means doing hard things even when you're scared, and you did the hardest thing. Victoria's voice shook. You're my hero, Mia. Mia's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really, the strongest, bravest, most amazing person I know. They stayed like that, the three of them forming a unit that felt more like family than performance, while monitors beeped and nurses checked vitals, and the world outside continued without them. Recovery was slow. Mia developed a fever on day 2 that terrified everyone until antibiotics knocked it down. Day 3 brought complications with fluid buildup that required additional procedures. Day 4 was better, and by day 5 she was sitting up, demanding real food instead of IV nutrition, making the nurses laugh with her observations about hospital life. Victoria barely left the hospital. She'd arranged for a hotel room nearby where she showered and changed clothes, but most of her time was spent in Mia's room, working remotely when the little girl slept, reading to her when she was awake, learning to navigate the strange world of pediatric recovery. Evan watched her transform. The Ice Queen Billionaire melted into someone softer, more human, more real. She learned Mia's favorite stories, figured out how to adjust the hospital bed for maximum comfort, advocated fiercely with the medical staff when pain management wasn't adequate. You're good at this, he said one evening while Mia slept, pain medication finally letting her rest. At what? Bothering nurses until they give her better drugs? At being here. At caring. Evan moved closer, lowering his voice. At being part of our family. Victoria's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide anymore. I've never had this before. Never let myself want it. And now, her voice broke. Now I can't imagine going back to how things were. Then don't. It's not that simple. My company is falling apart without me there. The board called an emergency meeting. My legal team is threatening to quit if I don't come back to handle the Marcus situation. And my competitors are circling like sharks, sensing blood in the water. So go back. Handle it. We'll be here when you're done. What if you're not? What if I leave and you realize you don't actually need me, that this was just crisis bonding and gratitude for the money? Evan pulled her into his arms, holding her close while she trembled. I fell in love with you before any of this happened. Before the seizure, before the surgery, before you had any chance to prove yourself. I fell in love with the woman who bought my daughter a dress, who fought her father for my dignity, who looked at Mia like she was precious. That's who you are, Victoria, not what you do in a boardroom. I don't know how to be that person all the time. Then be her some of the time. Be her when it matters most. He pulled back, meeting her eyes. Go to your company, fix what needs fixing, and then come back to us. We'll wait. You promise? I promise. Victoria left that night, reluctance written in every line of her body. She kissed Mia's forehead gently, careful not to wake her, then kissed Evan with desperate intensity. I'll be back by Friday, she said. 3 days to handle the crisis, restructure the board, and put safeguards in place. Take the time you need. 3 days? That's all I can stand to be away. She was gone by morning, the hospital room feeling emptier without her presence. Mia woke asking for her, and Evan explained that Victoria had to handle some work emergencies but would be back soon. She's coming back, though? She's not leaving forever? She's coming back, sweetheart. She promised. Good, because I think she's supposed to be my mom now. Is that okay? Evan's throat closed. Is that what you want? Yeah, she makes you happy, and she makes me happy. And Mommy told me before she died that it was okay to love other people, that she wanted us to be happy even if she wasn't here anymore. Mia's voice was certain, despite her exhaustion. So I think Victoria should be my new mom, if she wants to be. I think she'd like that very much. The next 3 days were agonizing. Mia continued to improve, growing stronger each day, but Evan felt Victoria's absence like a physical ache. They talked on the phone every night, Victoria updating him on the corporate warfare she was navigating, Evan telling her about Mia's progress. The board tried to force me out, Victoria said on night 2, claimed I was abandoning my responsibilities, that I wasn't fit to lead if I couldn't be present during a crisis. What did you do? I reminded them that I own 51% of the company and they serve at my pleasure, not the other way around. Her laugh was sharp. Then I restructured executive responsibilities, promoted 3 people who've been waiting for opportunities, and implemented new security protocols that should prevent another Marcus situation. Sounds efficient. It was brutal, but necessary. She paused. How's Mia? Getting stronger. The doctors say she can probably come home next week if she continues improving at this rate. Home? Victoria's voice was soft. Where's home, Evan? Right now? A tiny apartment with medical equipment and not enough space. Eventually, I don't know, somewhere Mia can be safe and happy. What about you? What makes you happy? You, us, this impossible thing we're building. He hesitated. But I need you to be honest with me, Victoria. Can you actually do this? Balance the company and a relationship, the empire building and being present for a kid who needs stability? I don't know, she admitted, but I want to try. And maybe that's enough to start with. Friday came with rain, gray and dreary, matching Evan's mood as he waited for Victoria to return. She'd texted that morning saying she'd be there by noon, but noon came and went with no word. 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock. By 3, Evan was fighting panic, convinced she'd changed her mind, decided the complications weren't worth it. Then Mia pointed out the window. Daddy, look! Victoria stood in the parking lot below, soaking wet, staring up at the hospital like she was gathering courage. Evan watched her shoulders square, watched her make the decision, watched her walk toward the entrance with purpose. She appeared in the doorway 15 minutes later, dripping rainwater, her hair plastered to her face, her expensive clothes ruined. But her eyes found Evan's, and the relief in them was unmistakable. I'm sorry I'm late. The meeting ran long, and then traffic. Mia interrupted her with a delighted squeal. Victoria, you came back! Of course I came back. I promised, didn't I? Victoria moved to the bed, gathering Mia into a careful hug. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Better now that you're here. Daddy was worried you wouldn't come. I was not, Evan started, but Victoria's knowing look stopped him. I was worried too, Victoria admitted. Worried I'd get here and you wouldn't want me anymore. That I'd taken too long, handled things wrong, proved I couldn't actually do this. Do what? Mia asked. Be part of your family, if you'll have me. Mia's smile was radiant despite her exhaustion. Are you asking to be my mom? Victoria's breath caught, her eyes finding Evan's over Mia's head. He nodded encouragement, giving permission for something he desperately wanted but was terrified to voice. Yeah, sweetheart. I think I am. Good, because I already decided you were. I just needed you to catch up. Mia settled back against her pillows, satisfied. Now we're a real family. Later, after Mia had fallen asleep and the nurses had dimmed the lights, Victoria and Evan stood together at the window watching rain stream down the glass. I resigned from the board, Victoria said quietly. Evan's head snapped toward her. What? I'm staying on as CEO, but I gave up my board seat and restructured my role to be more focused on strategy than day-to-day operations. Promoted a COO to handle the crisis management, delegated more authority, built a team that can function without me being physically present every second. She turned to him. I can't be the mother Mia needs and the CEO I've been. Something had to change. Victoria, you love that company. I love you more. Both of you. Her voice was fierce. And I'm tired of choosing work over life, success over happiness, empire over family. The company will survive without me being there 80 hours a week. But you and Mia, you need someone who shows up, who's present, who doesn't make you feel like you're competing with spreadsheets and board meetings for attention. Evan pulled her close, feeling her shake against him. That must have been terrifying. It was, but less terrifying than the alternative. She looked up at him. I want this, Evan, all of it. The complications and the hospital visits and the messy reality of building a life together. I want to be there when Mia starts 3rd grade, when she has another surgery, when she gets her first crush. I want to wake up next to you and fight about whose turn it is to do dishes and argue over where to spend holidays. That sounds suspiciously like a future together. It is. If you want it too. Instead of answering, Evan kissed her, poured 3 days of missing her, years of loneliness, a lifetime of hoping for exactly this into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria was crying again. I'm going to be terrible at this sometimes, she warned. I'll work too much, forget important things, panic when emotions get overwhelming. I'll probably try to fix everything with money instead of presents, and I'll need you to remind me that's not how love works. And I'll be broke sometimes, overwhelmed by medical bills, terrified I'm failing Mia. I'll probably lean on you too much, feel guilty about needing your help, forget that partnerships mean sharing burdens. Evan's smile was soft. Sounds like we're perfectly matched. Perfectly dysfunctional, maybe. The best kind of dysfunctional. They stood together watching the rain, both knowing that harder times were coming, recovery setbacks, corporate challenges, the daily grind of building a blended family from scratch. But for now, in the quiet of the hospital room with Mia sleeping peacefully nearby, they had this. The promise of something real, something lasting, something worth all the fear it took to reach for it. And that, Evan thought, was more than he'd dared to hope for when he'd answered that strange online posting. More than either of them deserved, but exactly what they both needed. A family, built from honesty and courage and second chances. Built from love. 3 months later, Evan stood in the doorway of what Victoria insisted on calling our home, and still couldn't quite believe it was real. The house wasn't a mansion. Victoria had surprised him by choosing something modest by her standards. A 4-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and a yard big enough for Mia to play in without being ostentatious. She'd sold the sterile penthouse within a week of making the decision, claiming she'd never felt at home there anyway. It was just a place to sleep between board meetings, she'd said while they toured the house for the first time, Mia already claiming the bedroom with the window seat. This feels like somewhere we could actually live. And they had. Moving in together had been chaotic and wonderful, and occasionally terrifying. Evan's entire apartment had fit into the moving truck with room to spare, his modest possessions looking small and shabby next to Victoria's carefully curated furniture. But she'd insisted on keeping his worn couch because Mia loved it, had arranged his daughter's medical equipment in the downstairs bedroom with the attached bathroom, had made space for his life and hers without making him feel like charity. The transition hadn't been seamless. That first week, Victoria had tried to throw money at every problem, hiring a full-time nurse for Mia, purchasing a new car to replace Evan's aging sedan, offering to pay off his remaining debts in one lump sum. They'd fought about it, their first real fight as a couple, voices rising in the kitchen while Mia watched anxiously from the living room. I'm not your project, Evan had said, his pride stung despite understanding her intentions. I don't need you to fix everything. I'm not trying to fix you, I'm trying to help. By making me feel like I can't take care of my own daughter? By implying everything I've done so far wasn't enough? Victoria had gone pale. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to buy your way into being the perfect mother instead of just being present and letting it develop naturally. The words had hit their mark. Victoria had sat down heavily at the kitchen table, her carefully constructed confidence crumbling. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a partner, a mother, someone who doesn't solve every problem with money and strategic planning. That's all I've ever been good at. Mia had appeared then, small and serious, climbing into Victoria's lap, despite still being weak from surgery. You're good at reading to me, and making funny voices for the characters, and tucking me in at night. That's what moms do. Is it enough? Victoria had whispered, holding Mia close. It's everything. They'd figured it out slowly, painfully, learning each other's rhythms and boundaries. Victoria had backed off on the grand gestures, focusing instead on small moments, helping Mia with homework, cooking dinner, even when she burned it spectacularly, showing up for doctor's appointments even when it meant leaving work early. Evan had learned to accept help without seeing it as failure, to let Victoria contribute financially without feeling emasculated, to understand that her love language was action, and sometimes that meant writing checks even when he wished it didn't. Now standing in the doorway watching Victoria help Mia practice walking without her oxygen tank for the first time since surgery, Evan felt something settle in his chest. This was home. This messy, complicated, beautiful thing they were building together. Daddy, look! Mia called, taking careful steps across the living room, her color better than he'd seen in years. I'm doing it. I see you, sweetheart. You're doing great. Victoria stayed close, her hands hovering protectively, but not touching, letting Mia find her own balance. The surgery had been successful beyond anyone's expectations. Dr. Chen had called it a complete repair, Mia's heart functioning at near normal capacity for the first time in her life. There would still be monitoring, still be precautions, but the constant fear of imminent crisis had lifted. "I'm tired," Mia announced after making it to the couch. "But good tired. Like after playing, not sick tired." "That's wonderful, baby." Evan settled beside her, Victoria on her other side, the three of them fitting together like they'd always belonged this way. "You're getting so strong. Strong enough to start school next week?" Mia's hope was palpable. She'd been homeschooled during recovery, tutors coming to the house, but she desperately wanted to be around other kids, to have a normal childhood. Dr. Chen said, "If this week goes well, you can start on Monday," Victoria said. "Half days at first with the school nurse monitoring you, but yes, real school." Mia's squeal of delight made them both laugh. She launched into excited chatter about what she'd wear, who she'd meet, whether the teacher would be nice. Evan caught Victoria's eye over their daughter's head. Their daughter, he thought with wonder. When had he started thinking of her that way, and saw his own joy reflected back? Later, after Mia had fallen asleep exhausted from her exertion, Evan found Victoria in the kitchen staring at her laptop with an expression he'd learned to recognize. Corporate crisis face. "What's wrong?" Marcus surfaced, or rather, the authorities found him in Singapore. She turned the laptop to show him news articles about the arrest. "He's fighting extradition, but our legal team thinks we have a solid case. The evidence I gathered before—" She stopped, her face darkening with memory. "Before what?" Victoria had never fully explained what happened that night at her office building, the night she'd confronted Marcus alone. Evan knew the basics, that she'd gathered evidence, that there had been an altercation, that she'd nearly died. But the details remained locked behind walls she hadn't fully dismantled yet. "I confronted him," she said slowly. "Went to the office after midnight when I knew he'd be there deleting evidence. I'd set up hidden cameras, recording equipment, everything I needed to prove what he'd done." "Victoria, that was insane. He could have killed you." "He tried." Her hand moved unconsciously to her ribs, where Evan knew scars from the fall still marked her skin. "When I showed him the evidence, told him I was turning it over to the authorities, he panicked, grabbed me, and we fought. I managed to hit record on my phone before he pushed me off the balcony." Evan's blood ran cold. "You fell from a balcony?" "Technically I was pushed, but I caught the railing one floor down, held on until security came." She said it calmly, like describing a mildly interesting business meeting rather than near death. "Broke 3 ribs, punctured a lung, spent 2 days in the hospital before I could even call you." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was ashamed, because I'd nearly gotten myself killed over corporate espionage while you were home taking care of Mia. Because it proved every fear I had about not being able to balance work and family." Her voice cracked. "Because I didn't want you to see how reckless I could be. How the woman you were falling in love with was someone who'd risk her life for a company instead of choosing the people who actually mattered." Evan pulled her into his arms, feeling her shake against him. "You're an idiot. I know. A brilliant, brave, occasionally stupid idiot who I love more than I can articulate. Well, even knowing I almost died for corporate revenge? Even knowing you're human and flawed, and sometimes make terrible decisions." He pulled back, meeting her eyes. "But you're done with that, right? Done with risking yourself for the company?" "I'm done being stupid, if that's what you're asking. The new security protocols mean I'll never be in that position again." And honestly, after almost dying alone in a hospital, her voice broke. "All I could think about was Mia asking where I was, you wondering if I'd abandoned you. That was worse than the physical pain. You called eventually. That's what matters. 2 days later, 2 days you spent thinking I'd left, that the crisis had proven more important than you." She gripped his hands. "I never want you to feel that way again. Never want to choose work over being here." "Then don't." Evan kissed her forehead. "Choose us. Every time it matters, choose us." "I will. I promise." The extradition took 6 weeks. During that time, Victoria threw herself into restructuring her company with the same intensity she'd once given to building it. She promoted people who'd been overlooked, implemented better work-life balance policies, created systems that didn't require her constant presence to function. If I died on that balcony, the company would have survived, she explained to Evan one night while they reviewed the changes. That should have been comforting, proof I'd built something sustainable. Instead, it was terrifying because it meant I'd sacrificed everything for something that didn't actually need me. But these people do. He gestured to the organizational charts she'd created, names and faces of employees whose lives she'd transformed by giving them authority and trust. You're building something better than an empire. You're building a legacy. I hope so. She studied the charts, her expression thoughtful. My father called yesterday, said he was proud of me. That's good, right? It's unprecedented. Richard Hale doesn't do pride, he does conditional approval and strategic encouragement, but he actually used the word proud. Victoria's smile was tentative. Said watching me choose family over corporate domination reminded him of why he fell in love with my mother. That building something lasting was more impressive than building something big. He's right. I know, I just wish it hadn't taken me almost dying to figure it out. Marcus's trial became a media circus. Victoria had to testify, reliving the confrontation and the fall, presenting evidence that damned him conclusively. Evan sat in the courtroom gallery with Mia, watching Victoria dismantle her former VP's defense with clinical precision. Is Victoria okay? Mia whispered, as Victoria described being pushed from the balcony, her voice steady but her hands clenched white-knuckled on the witness stand. She's being very brave, Evan said. Just like you were during surgery. Will the bad man go to jail? Yes, sweetheart. I think he will. The verdict came back guilty on all counts: corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, attempted murder. Marcus was sentenced to 20 years federal prison, his reputation destroyed, his career over. Victoria showed no triumph when the judge read the sentence, just weary relief that it was finally finished. I thought I'd feel vindicated, she said that night, curled against Evan in their bed. But mostly I just feel sad. He was brilliant, could have built his own company, made his own success. Instead, he chose the easy path and destroyed himself. That's not your fault. I know. But I hired him, trusted him, gave him access. I should have seen the signs. You're not responsible for other people's choices, only your own. Evan pulled her closer. And you chose to fight back, to protect your company and the people who depend on it. That took courage. Or stubbornness. Sometimes I can't tell the difference. With you, I think they're the same thing. Autumn came, bringing cooler temperatures and the start of Mia's first full semester of school. She thrived there, making friends easily, charming her teachers, finally getting to be a regular kid instead of a patient. The oxygen tank stayed home most days now, needed only at night or during strenuous activity. Her color was healthy, her energy boundless, her future suddenly full of possibilities that had seemed impossible 6 months ago. Victoria picked her up from school most afternoons, arriving in sensible clothes instead of business suits, her schedule restructured around being present for these small moments. Evan would find them in the kitchen, Mia chattering about her day while Victoria helped with homework, both of them covered in paint or flour or whatever project they'd started. We're making cookies for Daddy, Mia announced one Thursday, gesturing to the disaster zone that used to be their kitchen. Victoria says baking is chemistry, and chemistry is important. Victoria is correct, Evan said solemnly, surveying the flour dusted across every surface, the eggshells in the sink, the measuring cups scattered like archaeological artifacts. Though I'm not sure this particular experiment is going well. We're learning through failure, Victoria said, wielding a spatula like a weapon, which is apparently how science works according to Mia's teacher. The cookies are kind of flat, Mia admitted, studying the misshapen lumps on the baking sheet. But they'll taste good. Probably. They did taste good, or at least Evan claimed they did, while choking down cookies that had the texture of sweet gravel. But watching Mia's pride in her creation, seeing Victoria's barely suppressed laughter at the culinary disaster, he wouldn't have traded the moment for anything. These were the things that mattered, he'd learned. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but showing up, being present, choosing each other over and over in small, daily ways. That night, after Mia was asleep and they'd finally cleaned the kitchen, Victoria pulled out a small box from her nightstand. "I got you something," she said, suddenly nervous in a way he rarely saw anymore. Inside was a key. Simple, silver, unremarkable except for what it represented. "It's to my office," Victoria explained. "The private entrance. I had it made so you and Mia can come see me whenever you want. So you never have to wait in the lobby or feel like you're interrupting. So you know you're always welcome in every part of my life." Evan's throat tightened. Such a small thing, a key, but weighted with meaning. "Thank you. I'm trying, you know. To break down the walls between work Victoria and home Victoria. To let you see all of me, not just the parts I think are acceptable." She took his hand. "I want you to know my colleagues. See where I spend my days, understand that part of my life instead of keeping it separate." "I'd like that." "Good. Because I told my executive team about you and Mia, about how we met, how it started as a transaction and became real, about almost dying and realizing what actually mattered." Her smile was tentative. "They want to meet you, both of you. That doesn't scare you, letting your professional world and personal world collide?" "It terrifies me. But I'm tired of living in compartments, pretending I can be one person at work and someone different at home." She leaned into him. "I want to be whole, even if it's messy." "Especially if it's messy," Evan corrected. "Messy means real." They met Victoria's executive team the following week. A dinner at a restaurant nice enough to make Evan nervous, but casual enough that Mia could come. The executives were younger than he'd expected, diverse in background and approach, clearly brilliant and just as clearly devoted to Victoria's vision. "She talks about you constantly," Jennifer, Victoria's COO, said to Evan while Victoria helped Mia order from the menu. "Your daughter, your family, how you've changed her perspective on what success actually means. I hope that's not a problem." "Are you kidding? It's the best thing that could have happened. The old Victoria would have worked herself to death and called it dedication. This Victoria delegates trusts her team, builds systems instead of dependencies." Jennifer's smile was genuine. "We're getting a better leader because she's becoming a better person. That's worth celebrating." Watching Victoria laugh at something Mia said, her guard completely down, Evan understood what Jennifer meant. This version of Victoria, relaxed, present, allowing herself to be both powerful executive and devoted mother, was more effective precisely because she'd stopped trying to be perfect. "She's happy," he said, wonder in his voice. "She is. Finally." Jennifer raised her glass in a private toast. "Thank you for that, for seeing past the Ice Queen act to the person underneath. She made it easy, once I stopped being terrified of her." "Are you still terrified?" "Sometimes, but in a good way. The way you're scared of loving someone so much they could destroy you." He watched Victoria ruffle Mia's hair, both of them giggling. "But I'd rather be terrified and in love than safe and alone." Winter brought unexpected challenges. Mia caught a cold that turned into pneumonia, landing her back in the hospital for a week while Evan paced and Victoria coordinated care with the same intensity she'd once given corporate crises. The setback was terrifying, a reminder that recovery wasn't linear, that Mia's health would always be fragile in ways they couldn't fully control. "I thought we were past this," Victoria said on the third night, her voice breaking as they sat vigil beside Mia's hospital bed. "I thought the surgery fixed everything. It fixed her heart. It can't fix the fact that she'll always be more vulnerable to infections, to complications, to setbacks." Evan took Victoria's hand. "This is our reality. Good days and bad days, progress and backsliding, hope and fear all mixed together. How do you stand it? The not knowing, the constant worry? Because the alternative is not having her at all. And I'd rather have her sick than not have her." He squeezed her hand. "You're figuring that out too, I think. That love means being terrified and showing up anyway." Victoria nodded, tears tracking down her face. "When she first got sick, all I could think about was my brother. How we lost him, how it destroyed my parents, how loving someone made you vulnerable to unbearable pain. And I wanted to run, to protect myself by leaving before I got in too deep. But you stayed." "I stayed. Because she's worth the fear you both are." She looked at him, her expression raw. "I love you. I love Mia. And even if the worst happens, even if we lose her, her voice broke completely. I'd rather have loved her and lost her than never have known her at all. Mia pulled through. The antibiotics worked. Her strengthened heart handled the strain, and within a week she was home again, weak but recovering. The scare had shaken all of them, but it had also crystallized something important. They were a family now, bound together not by contracts or convenience, but by choice and commitment and love that had been tested and survived. Spring came with its promise of renewal. Mia's 8th birthday arrived, and they threw a party in the backyard. Her first real birthday party with school friends, balloons, cake, the whole chaotic celebration. Victoria had stressed for weeks about getting it right, consulting Pinterest like it held the secrets to the universe, determined to create the perfect day. It doesn't have to be perfect, Evan reminded her the night before, finding her making elaborate party favors at midnight. It just has to be fun. I want it to be special. I want her to remember this, to know she's celebrated and loved, and Victoria stopped, recognizing her own spiral. I'm doing it again, aren't I? Trying to buy my way into being a good mother instead of just being present. You're trying to show her you care. That's different. Is it? Because it feels an awful lot like the old me, throwing money and effort at something instead of just trusting that showing up is enough. Evan pulled her away from the craft supplies, holding her close. You know what Mia talks about from the weekend at your parents' estate? Not the fancy house or the expensive dress or any of the material things. She talks about picking flowers with you, about how you got dirt on your clothes and didn't care, about feeling like she mattered to you. She does matter. She's everything. Then the party will be perfect because you'll be there. Everything else is just decoration. The party was indeed perfect, though not in the Instagram-worthy way Victoria had planned. Rain forced them inside, the cake listing dangerously to one side, and one kid got sick from too much sugar and excitement. But Mia was radiant, surrounded by friends who didn't see her as sick or fragile, but just as Mia, funny, creative, kind. And when she blew out her candles, her wish whispered to Evan later was that Victoria would stay forever. I think that can be arranged, Evan said, his heart full. That night, after the guests had left and Mia was asleep surrounded by presents, Victoria found Evan cleaning up the disaster of wrapping paper and party debris. I have something to ask you, she said, her voice nervous in a way that made him look up sharply. She was holding a small box, her hands shaking. Victoria, let me say this before I lose my nerve. She took a breath, squaring her shoulders like she was facing a hostile board. 6 months ago, you answered an ad for a fake boyfriend, and I thought I was hiring someone to solve a problem. Instead, I found someone who saw past every wall I'd built, who loved me despite my flaws, who gave me a family I didn't know I needed. Victoria, you don't have to... Yes, I do. Because I've spent my whole life being afraid. Afraid of vulnerability, afraid of needing someone, afraid that love meant weakness. And you've taught me that the opposite is true, that letting you in, choosing you every day, building this life together, that's the bravest thing I've ever done. She opened the box. Inside were 2 rings, one clearly meant for him, the other smaller, designed for a child's hand. I'm asking you to marry me, Victoria said, her voice shaking. And I'm asking Mia if I can officially be her mother, not through some legal transaction or obligation, but because I love you both more than I thought I could love anything. Because you're my family, and I want to make it official in every way that matters. Evan couldn't speak, his throat too tight with emotion. He pulled her into his arms, the ring box pressed between them, and kissed her with everything he couldn't articulate. Is that a yes? Victoria asked when they finally broke apart, tears streaming down her face. That's a yes. 1,000 times yes. They woke Mia to ask her. Couldn't wait, too excited to keep it secret until morning. She sat up sleepily, confused until she saw the rings, and then her face transformed into pure joy. You want to adopt me? She asked Victoria, her voice small and hopeful. I want to be your mother in every way. Legally, officially, permanently. Victoria knelt beside the bed, taking Mia's hands. If you'll have me, will you read me bedtime stories forever? Forever. And help with homework even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard. And love Daddy? And take care of him when I'm not there? Victoria's voice broke. Always. I promise. Then yes, you can be my mom. Mia threw her arms around Victoria's neck. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart, so much. They planned a small wedding for June, just family and close friends in the backyard where Mia had celebrated her birthday. Nothing elaborate. Victoria had learned that the size of the gesture didn't matter nearly as much as the sincerity behind it. Catherine helped with planning, delighted to finally see her daughter choosing happiness over corporate domination. Richard walked Victoria down the aisle with tears in his eyes, whispering something that made her laugh and cry simultaneously. Mia was the flower girl, her role taken so seriously that she practiced walking for weeks beforehand. She wore the dress Victoria had bought her that first weekend, altered to fit her growing body, a symbol of how far they'd all come. When Evan and Victoria exchanged vows, Mia stood between them, part of the ceremony in every meaningful way. They'd written promises not just to each other but to her, commitments to show up, to choose family, to build a life based on love rather than obligation. I promise to be brave enough to be vulnerable, Victoria said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. To choose you over work, presence over perfection, love over fear. I promise to be the mother Mia deserves and the partner you need, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I promise to let you in, Evan said, to share my burdens instead of carrying them alone, to build a life with you instead of beside you. I promise to remind you that you're worth loving, that you don't have to earn affection, that showing up is enough. And Mia, when asked what she promised, said simply, I promise to keep being brave, and to help you both remember that love is choosing each other every day, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. The reception was joyful chaos, dancing and toasts, and Mia falling asleep on Catherine's lap while the adults celebrated into the evening. Victoria's executive team mixed with Evan's modest circle of friends, corporate titans sharing stories with graphic designers and neighbors, all of them united in celebrating something real and hard-won. I never thought I'd see this, Jennifer said to Evan during a quiet moment. Victoria actually happy, actually allowing herself to need someone. She's stronger for it, I think. She is, and so is the company. Turns out when you let yourself be human, you make better decisions about everything else, too. Late that night, after the guests had left and Mia was tucked into bed, Evan and Victoria stood in their bedroom. Not his room or her room, but theirs, truly shared now in every sense. We did it, Victoria said, studying her wedding ring like she couldn't quite believe it was real. We actually made this work. Did you doubt we would? Every single day? I kept waiting for you to realize I was too damaged, too difficult, too fundamentally broken to build a life with. You're not broken, you're just human, and that's more than enough. Evan pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her. I love you. Every complicated, brilliant, occasionally infuriating part of you. Even when I try to solve emotional problems with spreadsheets? Especially then, it's very you. She laughed against his chest, the sound free and genuine. I love you too, you and Mia and this impossible life we've built from what should have been a disaster. Best disaster I ever signed up for. They made love slowly, tenderly, a celebration of everything they'd survived and everything they'd become together. And later, tangled in sheets with moonlight streaming through the windows, Victoria whispered the things she'd been too afraid to say for months. I'm happy. Actually, genuinely happy in a way I never thought I could be. Good. You deserve it. So do you. We all do. The years that followed weren't perfect. Mia had setbacks, more hospitalizations, more scares, more reminders that her health would always be fragile. Victoria struggled sometimes with balancing work and family, with old instincts to control everything instead of trusting the process. Evan grappled with feeling less successful than his brilliant wife, with moments of insecurity about belonging in her world. But they navigated it together, built systems and traditions, learned each other's triggers and how to diffuse them, created a family culture based on honesty and presence and choosing each other even when it was hard. Mia thrived, made honor roll, joined the drama club, discovered a love of marine biology that would have made Sarah proud. She still had limitations, would always have them, But she also had a future that had once seemed impossible. College, career, maybe even a family of her own someday. "Do you ever regret it?" Evan asked Victoria on their 5th anniversary, watching Mia perform in the school play with boundless energy. "Choosing us over the empire you could have built?" "Not for a second. The company is still successful, still innovating, still making a difference. But it doesn't own me anymore." She squeezed his hand. "This, you, Mia, the life we've built, this is my real success. Everything else is just work." "Even when it's hard?" "Especially when it's hard, because the hard parts mean it's real, that it matters, that we're actually building something lasting instead of just going through the motions." The play ended with thunderous applause. Mia found them in the crowd afterward, her face flushed with excitement and triumph, and launched herself at them both. "Did you see? I remembered all my lines." "You were perfect," Victoria said, hugging her tight. "Absolutely perfect." "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" "Absolutely. What flavor?" "All of them. All of it." They drove to the ice cream shop, the three of them crammed into the sensible sedan Victoria drove now instead of the luxury car she'd once favored. Mia chattered from the back seat about the play, about her friends, about her plans for summer vacation. Normal kid things, the kind of ordinary magic that had once seemed impossible. At the ice cream shop, Victoria's phone buzzed with what was undoubtedly a work crisis. She glanced at it, then silenced it completely, giving Mia her full attention. "Not important?" Evan asked quietly. "Not as important as this." She watched Mia debate between chocolate and strawberry with the seriousness of someone making a life-altering decision. "This is what matters. The rest can wait." Years ago, that would have been impossible for her. The company would have come first, always, the crisis demanding immediate attention regardless of what personal moment it interrupted. But she'd learned, slowly and painfully, that there would always be another crisis, another problem to solve, another fire to put out, another reason to choose work over life. And she'd decided that wasn't how she wanted to live anymore. They ate ice cream on the shop's patio, Mia's choice of all the flavors resulting in a towering sundae she shared with both parents. The evening was warm, perfect, ordinary in all the best ways. "I love our family," Mia announced, chocolate sauce on her chin, completely content. "We love you too, sweetheart," Evan said, his heart full. Victoria said nothing, just reached across the table to take both their hands, forming a circle of connection that had started with a desperate online posting and become something neither Evan nor Victoria could have imagined. A family built not on blood or obligation, but on choice and courage and the daily decision to show up for each other. Later that night, with Mia asleep and the house quiet, Evan found Victoria on the back porch, staring up at stars. He joined her, settling into the comfortable silence they'd learned to share. "What are you thinking about?" he asked finally. "How different my life could have been. If I'd never posted that ad, never taken the risk, kept building my empire alone." She turned to him, her face peaceful in the darkness. "I'd be richer probably, more successful by conventional measures, CEO of a bigger company, more patents, more recognition. But I'd still be alone. Still be pretending that success was enough, that I didn't need anyone, that building something big mattered more than building something real." Her voice was soft. "I'd rather have this messy, complicated, beautiful life than all the success in the world. Even knowing how it started, the contract, the lies, the transaction, especially knowing that, because it proves that sometimes the best things come from the most unlikely places, that love can grow from calculation, that families can be built from desperation, that being brave enough to be vulnerable changes everything." Evan pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, marveling as always that this brilliant, fierce woman had chosen him, chosen them, chosen love over safety, mess over perfection, presence over power. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too, both of you, my family." She said the word like a prayer, like a promise, like the most important thing she'd ever claimed. My real success. And in that moment, sitting on their back porch under a sky full of stars, Evan understood something profound. Success wasn't measured in dollars or achievements or empires built. It was measured in moments like this, quiet and ordinary and infinitely precious. It was measured in a daughter who'd survived against terrible odds, who laughed freely and dreamed big and knew she was loved unconditionally. It was measured in a love that had started as transaction and become transformation, that had taught both of them how to be brave enough to need someone, strong enough to be vulnerable, wise enough to choose each other every single day. That was the real story, not the drama of corporate espionage or medical crises or the weekend that changed everything. Those were just the catalyst, the crisis that forced them both to examine what actually mattered and make choices they'd been too afraid to make before. The real story was what came after. The daily choice to show up, to be present, to build a life together one ordinary moment at a time. The hard conversations and the easy laughter, the setbacks and the celebrations, the fear and the hope, all mixed together into something messy and real and infinitely worth fighting for. Inside, Mia stirred in her sleep, probably dreaming of her triumph on stage, of ice cream and applause, and the boundless future stretching before her. A future made possible by a surgery funded by a fake relationship that became real, by a mother who'd learned that loving someone was braver than building an empire, by a father who'd been desperate enough to answer a strange online ad and wise enough to fall in love with the woman behind it. And outside, under the stars, Evan and Victoria held each other close, both knowing that the weekend that wasn't supposed to matter had given them everything that actually did. They'd found each other in desperation, but they'd chosen each other in hope. And that choice, made every single day in ways large and small, was the foundation of everything good in their lives. "Come to bed," Victoria whispered finally. "We have Mia's soccer game tomorrow, and you know she'll be up at dawn demanding pancakes." "Wouldn't miss it for the world." They went inside together, checking on their daughter one last time before settling into their own room, their own bed, their own shared life. And as Evan drifted off to sleep with Victoria in his arms, he thought about how much had changed since that desperate night when he'd answered an ad that seemed too good to be true. He'd been looking for money to save his daughter. He'd found a family instead. Found love and partnership and the kind of happiness that came from being brave enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to need someone, wise enough to choose connection over safety. Some deals weren't about what you gained. They were about what you became. And this deal, this fake relationship that had started with $50,000 and ended with everything that actually mattered, had transformed them both into people capable of building something real. People capable of choosing love. People capable of being a family. And that, Evan thought as sleep finally claimed him, was the best deal he'd ever made. The end.